give this a couple seconds. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another Artisans of Steel. I almost said knife talk. Artisans of Steel podcast. I am Marco Malmasi. I'm here to talk with some of my favorite knife makers in the world. Today we have my friend Dan Bidinger, who is a fellow Washingtonian, and I'm excited to get into a conversation with him and learn more about his story and his background. But before that, we're going to talk about our Patreon super sponsors real quick. Also, if you want to join the Patreon, become part of these conversations, check these conversations out live, because we do record these Patreon these podcasts live. And you get a chance to be part of the conversations by actively asking questions either during the conversation or leading into the conversation of these makers who are of very high level and very high talent. And it's a great opportunity to connect with them in a way that you wouldn't normally otherwise get a chance without maybe meeting them firsthand at a show or otherwise. So our super if you go to patreon.com, just search Malmasi Fire Arts or Artisans of Steel, I think, as well. That it will come up. If you go to my Instagram, I have a link in my bio. I have a link tree, and it's got all the different links, and the Patreon's right there at the top as well. You can find it there. Excuse me. So, without further ado, we have super sponsor Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Brewing. He is also, his maker page is Anchorage Forge, and he is a talented guy who has a deep background on all kinds of handiwork and concrete work and craftsmanship, and he is an extremely talented brewer, and he's gotten into knife making in the last couple of years. And I was actually just up working with him in his shop. We have a fun collaboration we're doing, and we're very close to getting that steel put together. We're making a very special mosaic Damascus steel that we're going to forge a fun blade out of. So if you don't already follow him, go follow his maker page, Anchorage Forge, because he's a great example to see, and following his journey has been super fun. And then if you aren't familiar with Anchorage Brewing beer, go to your local beer market, go check it out if they got it. If they don't got it, talk to the buyer, talk to somebody, fill out a survey. What do you got to do to try to get in there? Because it is definitely some of the best beer I've ever drank in my life. So go check him out again. He's on Instagram as @Anchorage Brewing and as @Anchorage Forge. Next up is my friend Eric Kidwell. He is at District 202 LLC. He's a great guy. He's been part of the knife making community for many years now, especially when it comes to the Travis Wirtz Hammering down in Arizona in March. He's kind of the point man who's always running the secondary camera, so that people have a couple different points of view to watch the various demonstrations from. So not only are they just kind of standing around in general like normal, but there's usually a pretty big crowd. So they run a second camera, which Eric has, and he's getting in there and he's getting up close and detailed shots, especially of the grinding. When a maker's standing over the grinder and facing the grinder, there's not a lot to see. So he gets in there, and then that gets projected to a TV where you can actually see what's happening in there. So Eric's a great guy though in general, and I'm thankful to know him. Again, go check him out, District 202 LLC. He's still setting up a shop, but he is going to be rocking and rolling. He's got a depth of knowledge and experience to pull from when he finally gets set up and rocking and rolling. So I'm excited to see that. And yeah. Okay, so next we have Josh Weston. He is on Instagram at Josh A. Weston. He's also on Instagram as part of the Dragon Forge EXP. That's the Dragon Forge experience, not experiment. The Dragon Forge experience travels around the United States to various Renaissance festivals, and they have these forges that Josh has fabricated that look like dragons. And so the way the forge works is you're pulling hot steel out of the dragon's mouth. They're super elaborate and beautiful, and I would love to see them someday in person. They're really cool. And in general, Josh is also a great guy, and I'm excited to see him at Blade Show, which is coming up next week. Yes, next week. No, wait, this week. I fly out on Wednesday. I'm recording this on Monday. I fly out on Wednesday. And so it's going to be good to hang out with him and see him. He's just an awesome dude. very talented graphic artist. He does all kinds of creative stuff. He's been playing with lasers a lot lately, and all of a sudden the sun decided to come out and try to blind me. So I'm going to close these blinds down a little bit. And yeah, so that's Josh. Again, he's Josh A. Weston on Instagram, as well as the Dragon Forge, or sorry, at Dragon Forge EXP. Next up, we have Russell Tinsley of Ouzel Finch Beers. He's the owner and operator of Ouzel Finch, who is a brewery based out of Virginia. And I think the brewery is in an old fort, if I'm not mistaken. They got a tasting room. They have all kinds of activities and events going on there, from music and markets and art shows and stuff like that. They have a new, I was just looking at, they have like a fruited sour that they just came out with. That sounds really delicious. They dabble in all kinds of sours and really wild out of the box flavors. I think they had like a banana cream pie recently, or maybe a lemon bar not that long ago. They have all kinds of stuff, and they're super delicious beers. His maker page is at Can't Make Knives, which isn't really true. He's busy with the business, so he doesn't make a lot of knives. But I think when he started, he felt like he couldn't make knives. But he spent some time getting some education up at the New England School of Metalwork, working with some very talented makers and learning him some knife making, and he's doing some good work. So also go check him out at NOST. That's Nost Brewing Project. Nost, I believe, is the Greek root word for nostalgia. And so essentially the idea is that they are brewing what would be considered, some people's first beers, which might have been, some kind of generic brand stuff. But the ingredients that he's using in the Nost Brewing Project are really high quality. And so they have the nostalgic flavor, but it's brewed with better ingredients, higher quality ingredients, and they are some of the best beers. They're so good. So go check out Nost Brewing Project. Next, we have Dan Hubbs. He's 66 Mountain Knives. He's on Instagram and Facebook at 66. Those are the numbers, 66 Mountain Knives. He's a maker who I've been fortunate to get to know over the last couple of years now, and actually taught and met in a class that I taught last September here in Washington. He's a really good dude. He does some really great work. He focuses a lot, mostly I think, on EDCs, and he's making some phenomenal steel. And he gets really great finishes on his steel. He's worth a follow for sure. So make sure you go check him out at 66 Mountain Knives. He does a lot of feather work lately, as well as mosaics, and I'm really loving it. So go check him out and check out what he's doing, because I see it, and it kind of gets my creative wheels turning in my head and makes me want to get back in the forge and do some fun stuff. Okay, last but certainly not least, we have Lawrence Lake. He's Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also find him online. What is it? www.maritimenifesupply.com. He has all your knife making needs taken care of. If he doesn't have something that you need as a knife maker, he can find it and source it and get it to you. He's based out of Atlantic, Canada, but he's also a great resource for American makers. He can get it to you ASAP. He's actually going to be down at Blaze Show. It'll be great to see him too. We're going to be hanging out together with other friends, and it's gonna. I love Blaze Show, and because it creates an opportunity for all of us, or kind of an excuse for all of us, to kind of get together and see each other every once in a while, because it's almost like a little reunion. So it'll be good to see Lawrence again and hang out. But he, like I said, he's a great resource for grinding belts, machines, tools. Supplies, handles, pins, glues, whatever you need for knife making, he can help take care of you. He's just got a massive restock of steel back in his shop. So go check him out again on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Maritime Knife Supply and maritimenifesupply.com. Okay, so excuse me, without further ado, geez, the sun does not know what it's trying to do today. Trying to blind me right now. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I'm struggling right now. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think I got it dialed in for now. My friend Dan Bidinger, I first met him. Actually, I'm going to pull him in here and talk to him and do this introduction so I can kind of embarrass him a little bit. Not embarrass him. No. I met Dan. I met you, I believe, for the first time in 2019 at the Blade West in Portland, Oregon. You came up, you handed me some of your work as well, and I was standing there with like Neil Kamimura and Don Wynn, and I can't remember who else. Andreas Kalani, I think, was nearby too. And anyways, you handed your work to me, and me and Don were kind of standing there looking at it, I believe. And I was thoroughly impressed by it, and especially for somebody who had only been making knives for a year or two at that point. And the fit finish were very clean. Your blade finish was really nice. Your blade geometry was good. I was very thoroughly impressed, and it's been cool to get you to know you and become friends with you over the years, because I've enjoyed watching you develop as a maker from that point to where you are now with your complex compound grinds. Your fit and finish just keeps getting better and better. Your handle sculpting is really unique and very cool. And I don't know, I think it's just been a lot of fun to get to be part of your journey and to see you grow as a maker. And I really enjoy that. And I appreciate you being here and joining me for the conversation.
Thank you very much. That was a very kind introduction. And I was looking for that photos of that knife yesterday that I showed you at that show, and man, it was terrible.
Was it?
No, it was.
Did it have like a purple handle on it?
It had Cocobolo.
Okay.
And I think just something black, and one of the only mosaic pins I ever used because I messed up drilling the holes, and it was a fix. Yeah.
I see.
So, but yeah, no, But no, yeah, that is where I met you guys, and I remember about a month later. I mean, it was a really cool experience. It's still the only knife show I've ever been to.
Sure.
But yeah, a month or so later, you just called me up on the phone, and that was shocking to me. I was like, "Who is this?" And I was like, "Why are you calling me on the phone?" And no, you engaged with me, and from that were just very helpful. And I took a lot of inspiration from your work and learning from your work and Don's and other makers and stuff like that. But yeah, you were very kind to follow up, I guess.
Yeah, I think we did exchange numbers. We must have, obviously. Or maybe we started messaging on Instagram and you passed along your phone number. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
I don't remember. I do remember, like, my number is still available if anyone goes looking for it. So,
well, and I think that's not that. I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm like, oh, I'm the authority, but I think that definitely speaks to how impressed I was with your work, and I thought it was. And you're only, so what's really cool, you live up in Sequim, Washington.
yeah,
You're only like maybe a couple hours, hour and a half. You would know better.
About 2 hours. Yeah,
2-hour drive, and it's gorgeous up there.
mm-hmm.
You have the sun right now. I'm getting spots of sun and some gloom and rain, but we need the rain anyways. It's gonna be a hot summer. But anyways, you're not that far away, and I was excited to meet another maker who is nearby. And for me, helping people has been kind of, I don't know what to call it, my path, my thing, my whatever, but I enjoy helping makers wherever I can, however I can. I am never looking for accolades from it. I just think for me, like, doing this work has been a way for me to kind of find my niche, my thing, my whatever, my personal genius, and dial it in, and or a practice that helped me to just get better at something, and then whatever that something is, creating a result, which is the knives that go out into the world and help benefit people in their lives, and the people that they surround themselves with. And I think there's a really unique and interesting connection between us as makers and the things we make, and the people that go to, and then the people that spend time with those people, and so on and so forth. And so, because I discovered that for myself, I try, like with this Patreon, I try to do the same to help others kind of discover that for themselves, or maybe even discover that this isn't the path for them. They might appreciate it, but they'd be like, nah, no, I don't want to do this. So
always fun
that's
to.
why I was excited to reach out and connect with you.
Well, yeah, no, I really appreciated it. It kind of, and we've hung out a few times since then, and
Yep.
it kind of uh I don't know. It gave me some confidence and stuff that, anyway,
Yeah.
that was helpful in getting to where I am now. So
Sure.
it's been a slow growth, but it's been steady since the beginning, and I've been very fortunate
Yeah.
in who has encountered me and who I've encountered along the way. So
Yeah.
both in customers and other makers. So
Right.
yeah.
And I think that's good. I think slow growth. Slow growth, if you're trying to make a living from it, slow growth can be hard, but at the same time, it's like it's like creating a root structure. And that slow growth helps to create a stronger root base or foundation from which you continue to grow from. If your base is very narrow and you're trying to go super high, you essentially end up with a tower that can topple over at any point. But if you start really wide and then you grow from there, then you have a very strong foundation that's hard to shake you from. And I think you've done a good job with creating that, and you're continuing to do that.
Well, yeah, and it was. I mean, I think that if I had hit super fast growth, it might have destroyed the business. I don't know.
Sure.
It's I had to grow along with it. It was this is the first time I've done business for myself or anything like
Right.
that. So getting I was able to learn along with the growth as it came.
Yeah.
So and you know if I had gotten sudden popularity, I could have been overwhelmed or taken on too much or something like that and gotten into a situation that you can get a bad reputation from. I can no longer communicate with all the people that I've spoken to. And
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
so, it's something that as I've grown, I've been cautious to try to not take on too much and not.
Not to overextend yourself.
Yeah.
To be careful
So,
not. I think that's smart. I think that's super smart because I think I fell into personally myself. I think I fell into the trap that honestly created for myself of trying to grow and become well known and popular for my work as quickly as possible, and it happened pretty quickly, and it became problematic because it was happening faster than I was able to manage. Kind of
yeah.
like what you're saying. The slow growth isn't good because you can grow with it and you can manage it as it continues to grow and make adjustments versus have me trying to figure out a lot of things really in a very short period of time, and not doing it very well or as well as as well as I would have liked to. So yeah, that slow growth, I think there's definitely benefits to it. But before we get too deep into all that, I want to kind of start out just like who are you? Who's Dan Bidinger? And where do you am I saying I always feel like I'm
Nope.
messing
You got
Bidinger.
it right.
Okay.
I really don't care, but it's Bidinger.
Okay.
The biggest one would be Bidinger, but
Bidinger.
it's Bidinger, and I really don't care. People have been saying it multiple ways since I was a kid, and
Okay.
I think as a child I wasn't sure which one it was until
Well,
I
for
got a bit older.
somebody with a unusual name like mine, I am very sensitive to making sure that I'm getting people's names right.
Yeah,
Um, and I have been saying Bidinger for a long time. I think we had a conversation probably about a year ago. I was like,
yeah.
I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Damn it. um, so, anyways, where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Like, what have you been doing with your life, and how did that lead to knife making?
Um, yeah. So I was born in Anchorage, Alaska, and lived there um, most of my childhood. So I guess my dad was in the oil business, so he worked for British Petroleum, and we moved to Scotland when I was 5 to 8 years old. So just developmental time and stuff like that. But then we went back to Alaska, and
Okay.
I stayed there until I was just before I turned 18. So yeah, grew up there. And I mean, as a child, I don't know, knife making was never
Not on your radar.
exposed to anyone who made knives. And I liked taking things apart, but I was never great at putting them back together.
Hmm.
I messed around in the garage and stuff like that when we had one when I was little.
Sure.
But you know um at that younger age, I mostly did a lot of rock climbing and stuff like that when I was indoor stuff, just sports stuff. But yeah, I liked knives. I didn't have a ton of them or anything like that. I carried a pocket knife with me, like you do. And I always liked knives and swords and things like that. And
Sure.
but yeah, never was exposed to any knife making, and then that didn't come until quite a bit later.
Sure.
But yeah, from there, I mean, none of this has anything to do with knife making, but I moved to Albania. No, sorry, I went to Colorado. I dropped out of high school.
Okay.
Didn't like school.
Me too.
Um, yeah, so dropped out of high school. Went to Colorado to live with my sister. At this point, my parents, again with my dad's job, they moved to the United Arab Emirates to Abu Dhabi. Um, I had already dropped out of high school, but I was still high school age or something along those lines. I can't remember the timeline exactly, but
Sure.
so the schools there wouldn't take me. There's not a lot to do, until you can get a job.
Sure.
So I moved in with my sister in Colorado. She was going to college down there, and spent about 6 months there. Surprisingly, no one wants to hire a dropout kid with no experience in anything
Weird.
or anything. So I got this through the fact that I climbed. That was it. I have no certifications or anything like that. I got an offer to go to Albania and work at a Christian kids camp there
Okay.
through some people my parents knew. And yeah, I did that. Spent 2 years over there. Met my wife. Got a job in Abu Dhabi or in the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
And yeah, my wife and I moved there and started by living with my parents, who had a nice big place there, and eventually got our own place, and we lived there for in a different city. We moved to Dubai, got a different job, and yeah, lived over there for 12 years, I think, for me.
Okay.
10 for because I was on and off anyway. Yeah, so 11, 12 years. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what I remember seeing a picture uh, on your page, and I was like, "What is going on?" Because I wasn't clear about what was going on. And you didn't just. I mean, you had to have been a pretty good climber. Um,
I wasn't good. I mean, I got into
maybe not
kids
pro,
camp
but pretty
on a
good.
no, you don't have
Really?
to be good to work at a kids camp.
You don't?
In high
Okay.
school, I could climb just like everyone else could climb, that I hung out with and stuff like that. But no, never good, never, I went into charity, you know, like working at a ropes course and stuff like that. And then I went on to um I started in Dubai as corporate team building, running ropes courses for office
Oh,
jockeys.
okay.
So you don't have to know how to climb at all. You just have to know how to, you know, guide people around and run the ropes.
Yeah.
So so yeah,
How to clip on a carabiner so they don't
exactly.
fall out.
Yeah. Tie a knot, put away the ropes, that kind of thing, inventory and maintenance and stuff like that. So
But okay, but tell me about the flag job because that's what I'm working toward, and I feel like
yeah.
you're skirting it.
Well, no,
Tell us about it.
so we lived there a while, and that job with the corporate team building, it was started full time, then went to freelance. So it wasn't like supporting us, and so I got to know a guy who offered me. He said, I've got room on a course to do industrial rope access training. I've got space. You can just pay for the test, which was like $150.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to pay for the training itself. And I did that. And after that class, I said, so what do I do with this? Where do I go to get a job with this certifications and stuff like that? And he's like, well, I've got a guy who needs workers soon. I will call him.
Okay.
And I just passed my test, and I was driving. It was about 2 hours from where I stayed, and I was driving home from the test. And I got a call on the phone saying, yeah, hi, you got your certifications, blah blah blah. Yeah, we need you in Azerbaijan tomorrow
Oh wow.
to we're doing some work on a flagpole. And I was like, sure, you know. And I didn't hear from that guy again for a month.
Okay.
It went from tomorrow to not hearing from him again.
Oh.
And
Okay.
then I went to Azerbaijan and started my work for a company called Trident Support that builds the world's tallest flagpoles.
Right.
So, yeah, we were working on a project there, and then I started with them freelance and then went full time. And yeah,
Okay,
so
so when people hear flagpoles, I'm sure people have seen some big flags and tall flagpoles, but tell us like some of the stats on these flags because they're pretty monstrous.
yeah, so I think the one in Azerbaijan was 160 feet.
Okay,
Or no, sorry, 160 meters.
which is much higher than 160 feet.
Yeah, I can never remember the conversion to
I
feet. I know that
well, 1 meter
we've
is
done a
3 point.
lot that were 120. Like in the
Wow.
UAE, we had 4 or 5, 4, that were 120 feet, or no, sorry, 400 feet, 120 meters.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the work, what ended up becoming maintaining the poles that were in
Yeah.
the
Wow.
UAE. And when I joined the company, they had done 4 world records, I think. And then I worked on the 5th and then the 6th in Tajikistan. So,
Yikes.
which was 165 meters, and that's
Hmm.
the tallest pole that I worked on. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So the 106 meters is 347.77 feet.
106,
106 meters.
160.
Oh, 160. I
Yeah,
thought you said the first one was 106. Sorry, 160, 525 feet.
yeah,
So you're good with heights, is what you're saying? Because that
yeah.
sounds
I've been pretty
horrifying to
okay
me.
with heights, so that was never really an issue.
How?
Although towards the end of leaving the country, or towards the end of working there, I started having nightmares about getting on top of the pole. Like I'd be up on the pole and locked out with no equipment,
Oh, wow.
because there's a door at the top, and you get out with your equipment to work at the top of the pole. And I kept on having nightmares of basically just holding on when you're gonna
For dear life.
fall, and then
Oh,
falling
Christ.
dreams. So,
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
oh yeah, it's great.
So,
So
okay, so then these flagpoles, because they're so tall, they're large enough for you to climb up inside, not from the
yeah, they
outside.
almost most of them, we had some 75-meter poles. Those were kind of where we didn't have ladders on them. So if you
Okay,
had to get to the top, you needed to hire a crane and stuff like that.
I gotcha.
So, but yeah, no, the anything over 120 meters had a ladder up the center.
Which
They're
is
a lot
400
like
feet.
the wind
Oh,
tower construction,
right.
which
Like
people probably see more than giant flagpoles.
sure.
So
And how tall are those? Those wind.
I want to say they're about half the height.
Okay.
but
So
they
about
support
150.
so much more.
Yeah.
Like they're
Those
and the
propellers look pretty
blades
heavy.
themselves are
Yeah.
absolutely massive.
Right.
So the propellers.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I
Um,
see them being trailered down the highway. I'm like,
oh
damn! Look at that thing.
yeah.
That's a big boy.
Yep. No,
That's
I've seen some photos, like aerial photos and stuff of these things being assembled on the ground, and you know, we worked with the tubes, but that's all so much more complex. We just stacked tubes and bolted them together. So, and we didn't fabricate them. We were basically the company facilitated them and then installed them.
Oh, it's okay.
We'd get them
The
engineered, and then we
Yeah,
had a giant fabricator there in the UAE fabricate them up,
I gotcha.
and then we'd stack them and bolt them together, and then we'd do stuff like, making sure they didn't rust, and the
Yeah.
flags had to be changed almost every 2 weeks because they would blow out, they'd rip from the wind and stuff like that. So in the country where we worked, we'd just be driving around, changing flags, and of course,
Wow.
you've got rules about um when somebody dies, you have to half mast the
Right.
flags. So you'd get calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, be like, "This person died. We got to half mast all the flags all around the country." And
Holy
so
smokes.
hop in
Right.
the car, and
Yeah.
we different people would be like, "I'll run this side of the country. You go to that side of the country," and
Sure.
drive 4 hours and hit, a line of flagpoles in different areas.
Yeah.
So
So this is you
yeah,
up on top of a thing. That's wait. Oh, geez. I don't know if I can make this work.
it,
Struggling.
oh, yeah, it's fine. That's the 165-meter
160.
flagpole in
Okay.
Tajikistan.
Let me just do the conversion real quick because we only did 160. 165 is. Did you know exactly what it was?
I did not. I did it once, maybe 41. Okay, yeah.
541.3 feet. Wow.
So
And 8 inches.
there you go.
Or 0.3. No, wait, 0.3 is the other way. 6 inches.
That's what matters. That's 6 inches.
4 inches. All right. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
541 and 4 inches. That's nuts. So I'm curious, like, how do you figure out that you are good with heights? Because I'm sure up to that point, you're the highest you'd been in like a climbing apparatus was not 300 feet.
No. Yeah, I don't know. I
Just
think if you've got
you've
no
never had an
problem
issue.
at 30 feet or 40 feet, you're probably fine, I guess. I never really thought about it, but yeah, definitely climbing the flagpoles and definitely every time you get out and you suspend yourself exposed on that kind of height, like at the top, working outside the pole, it's definitely like when you sit down in your harness, you're like, here we go. Hope
Right.
everything holds, which everything should
Gosh.
definitely holds, and it's got redundancies and all that stuff. But there's definitely like there's nothing you can do if you fall. You're not stopping yourself in any way.
Right.
So, but yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I, worked with lots of people. They didn't have any problems with heights, and there's plenty of people that do this way. The other jobs that people go into with the industrial rope access of cleaning oil rigs and working, in the sea and all this crazy stuff. It's
Yeah.
nothing that I wanted to be a part of.
Gosh.
So
Okay. So okay. I'm just trying to understand. So was there a crane that you were also working with that you were helping to guide the alignment of all these bolt holes and all that kind of stuff?
yeah, when we put it together, you
Yeah.
use a crane, and then hopefully you don't have to get a crane back. A lot of these places get, you know, um, landscaped and all this stuff that
Yeah.
if you had to bring a crane back, it would be disastrous.
Oh,
But
right. Yeah.
yeah, on this
Yeah.
photo shoot, on this photo, uh we all wrote up. So there's a cap section that's about to be installed, the last piece.
Sure.
with an aircraft warning light and the pulleys and stuff for the cables
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff like that. And
Okay.
we all rode up on it, which if we were anywhere else, that wouldn't be allowed.
You rode up on the cap, on
On
the
the cap
crane.
connected to the crane.
Oh my god.
I think it was 4 or 5 of us, and we all took turns transferring over to the pole and getting photos taken. Then the crane would pull away, and
Oh
some
my
the people on
god.
the cap would take photos.
That gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it, just trying to
Sorry.
imagine it. No, it's good. It's just like I'm looking at the picture and you're standing there so like nonchalant and you're 541 feet and 4 inches up in the air and you're just like you're good. Where my legs my legs start to like uncontrollably like convulse and jiggle and wiggle and I would
Yeah.
fall probably down the center of that thing, if not off the side. Thank goodness for the
It's a
harness,
very healthy fear to have. I mean, that's not a natural place to be.
but
So it's yeah, and yeah, but yeah, so that photo and that magazine, my
Mhm.
boss, I wasn't there, but my boss got onto the Tajikistan Airlines flight back to Dubai, and those were the in-flight magazines.
Oh wow, that's
And
the
I don't know
cover of
why
it
they
too.
picked my photo, but yeah, that's the only that's
You
the only
probably
magazine cover I've ever been
maybe out of anybody, you're the most like chill looking dude. You're just there, just like, yep,
on.
I do this every day. I'm good.
Well, there were real pros there. From we would always hire a crew of Romanians to come out when we had bigger jobs because
Oh yeah.
yeah, they were legit.
Well, what was the
We
difference?
They were high. They had reached higher certifications. We didn't do enough stuff. I mean, we climbed ladders
Sure.
and we hung off the sides. We didn't do enough stuff to get much certification higher than just the basics.
Okay.
So, and we didn't log enough hours. You know, it's the people washing windows and doing construction and stuff
Oh,
kind of constantly that get
I
these
got
higher
you.
certifications and stuff like that and spend all the time on these ropes and stuff like that. So
Wow.
we were just, I mean, climbing a rope with a, climbing a ladder with a rope
You guys were plebs
attached. Yeah.
compared to the Romanian guys.
So yeah,
Wow.
we'd bring in, and the company was so small to have people full time for when we only actually put up flagpoles occasionally.
I see.
So yeah,
Crazy. And then from flagpoles you go to knife making.
pretty much. Yeah.
How does that connection happen? Maybe not necessarily from the flagpoles, but how do you get into knife making from there?
Yeah. While I was there, we got to meet different people, and it wasn't like anyway, there was a exhibition every year called the hunting exhibition, and it was, because it was a big sport, hunting, not in the country itself, but a lot of the locals and rich people would go off to Africa and
Uh-huh.
hunt stuff, and
Yep.
and so there'd be and there was no guns in the country for private ownership. I think the locals were allowed to have them, um, hunting rifles and stuff like that, but not for anyone who wasn't a citizen,
I see.
which was most people. The UAE is like 90% expat worker. So, um, yeah. So at one of these, I had gone to one of these shows, and there was a knife stand with a bunch of knives and stuff like that, and a
Okay.
guy, a custom maker. Actually, it was two of them. I can't remember the other guy's name. He was an Argentinian, but the guy I got to know was Gustavo Villar, who
Okay.
is a very talented maker. Um, Now in Brazil, although I think he's still going back and forth to the UAE.
Sure.
But basically, as I got to know him, he was privately hired, um, by one of the royal family
Okay.
to just make knives for him full time. And
Wow.
yeah, so he
That's pretty wild.
and yeah, yeah. And he's not, there's I guess he's worked with I don't know them, but there's a royal knife maker in Jordan, and he's gone and worked with them that yeah, so he just made knives and kind of whatever the guy wanted him to get onto. He did runs of like 200 folders and different stuff with. I
Yeah.
remember that was the first time I'd ever seen Dama steel. I walked into his shop one day and he's like, "There's $35,000 worth of steel stacked on this little
Yeah.
table," and
Yeah.
yeah, he made folders out of them, and yeah, he does really. And he's really into the hand engraving and hand texturing and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, and
Um,
he's like you said, he's a talented maker. And
very.
his I guess repertoire, there's nothing specific. He does all kinds of crazy stuff.
He is really multifaceted in his
Yes.
making. So, and it's really impressive. He's made stainless Damascus. He's made makumagane. I think I'm saying that right. I'm not sure, but and inlays and hand engraving, and he really pursues
Right.
it all. And I mean, it was a great place for him as well because he got to mess with stuff that was really expensive to buy. It was
Sure.
being prepaid for, so he did a lot with gold and
Right.
Damas steel and
Or stuff like this.
yeah, yeah.
Holy smokes.
There was
This is
big chunks
crazy
of
stuff.
elephant tusk in his shop and stuff like that, and
Yeah. Well, I
um,
think this looks like fossilized stuff to me.
yeah,
But
yeah. He
yeah.
messes with fossilized stuff, but there was definitely big pieces of ivory in
Well,
the custom shop. So
well, and even just looking at the comments on this one really quick, we got GTC Knives, who's a guy I've been following for a long time, super
yeah,
talented.
he's done a lot of collaborations with GTC.
Yeah, we got Rodrigo Sofredo's on there saying, yeah. We got Ben Kumon down in the hearts giving love. I'm just like,
Yeah,
geez, he's not nobody. That's for
no,
sure.
he's very, and he's not been huge on the because he hasn't sold
Right.
to private people very often in the last while because he's been working for somebody mostly.
Doing a lot of private work.
But he's gotten out to shows. He's won a bunch of awards, I think, in France.
That's
Um,
sure. I believe it.
yeah, because he gets out there and when he is over there, and yeah. So, but yeah, he was incredibly kind to me,
Yeah.
and I realize now how annoying I must have been showing up to his shop and just kind of being irritating and asking
Were you
questions.
really though? I mean, come on. What
Well,
Hogstrom Knives? I'm sorry.
yep.
I keep seeing all these crazy people who are like commenting on his things. I'm like, holy smokes.
No, he does, and that's that. I don't think that's on the titanium. I think
Yeah.
that's all hand cut or ground. It's not a
With like
forged texture or something like that. He's got air chisels and
yeah.
he's got hand hammer chisels and he's got little Dremel tools and micromotors and stuff like that. Although the titanium on the front side in the inlay, that's probably a forged texture.
Yeah.
He was doing stuff like that when I was there and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So, but yeah,
Okay.
he was really getting into the detailed um in engraving and texturing and stuff like that with the titanium, and so
Yeah. So you get connected with him and he lets you into his shop and lets you start hanging out and doing stuff.
yeah, I'd
And
see him
and
every
so
once
so
in a
you met
while
him
when
at the
I
show, sorry. You met him
what
at the show. You met him at the
yeah
show and then how did you guys connect after that? I think I might have missed that.
I asked one time, and some I went out to the area. I was in the area because I drive a lot for work and go to different cities and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
he lived about 2 hours or an hour and a half from me, and I'd go out, and one day I called him and he invited me over to the shop, and um, just would visit him on occasion. And this is where I was super annoying. I came unannounced, and
Oh, you just popped
yeah,
in.
no, I was terrible because I never knew when I was going out there.
I got you.
So yeah, and
And phones didn't
he was
exist. No, I'm just
yeah.
teasing you.
No, I was if somebody did what I did to him, I don't know if I would have been as generous. And so, and I didn't see it the same. I had never really seen there's not a lot of these private businesses or private maker spaces in the UAE. It's not set up for that. It's,
Sure.
a lot more corporations and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but anyway.
Well, I'm not quite sure what happened, but we lost him. I'm gonna message him real quick. Real quick. Tell him to come back, just to follow the same link back in. Let's see. Just follow. Oh, here he is. He's back. All right. He did it on his own. There he is.
So, okay, I don't know, but yeah, so I think I had looked into it, and I
Okay.
think from the first time I met him, because I met him a few years in a row at shows, at the hunting exhibition,
Sure.
and without seeing him in between that time at all, and stuff like that. And I think during that time, I started pursuing little leatherwork projects because it was something I could do in our
Right.
apartment
Right.
and stuff like that. And just looking into it, I think the first time I'd ever seen somebody make a knife or learn anything about it was the Nick Wheeler build along on
Sure.
Blade forums that a lot of people reference.
Classic. Yeah.
And it was just the knives were so cool, but it seemed so impossible. Like and not to mention he was working with salt pots, and it's like it just seems so foreign and inaccessible, but amazing at the same time. So
Sure. Sorry, and this is still while you're in Dubai.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
was probably before I really got to know Gustavo. I maybe met him, but not gotten to know him much. So
I
I
see.
had started researching leather work and stuff like that. But yeah, just through with Gustavo and helping me. I never worked at his shop. I never took lessons from him necessarily.
I got you.
But I started building a grinder with a machine shop we worked with for my company, and I was able to use my company was very nice. It was a very small company, but my boss was nice enough to let me um, use a little corner of the warehouse and mess around.
That's great.
Yeah, so yeah, I built a grinder, built a forge with the help of some metalworking, fabricating places,
Mm-hmm.
and used a old treadmill
Oh
motor
yeah.
and the whole treadmill board and just slapped to the side of the machine. You
Yeah.
know. So and yeah, it worked, and I think I probably made 10 knives over there. So
Oh wow.
yeah, and I forged um a couple, maybe four. I think I forged four knives in my career.
Okay.
Sitting here is probably the only stock removal guy you've talked to on this podcast.
No, I talked to not Don. I mean, Don has started forging, but
Don
Don's
started forging, so
but 99% of his career has been stock removal work. All right, tell me about. Let's see. I'm gonna do a screen share again. I pulled up. I dug down to the bottom of your Instagram. Tell me about this piece.
oh my goodness, that's my first knife. It was a file quenched
It was
in
okay.
motor oil, I think
Perfect.
aluminum ferrule.
Yeah.
I made the sheath, and my mother still has it.
Oh, she does.
Yeah,
Oh, I think. Did I see that when I came up and visited you guys?
you may have. It
I
was in
think
a
I
little
did.
display case. Yeah, my
Yeah.
mom's keeping it. So, and it will not hold an edge. It's junk steel at this point. I
It
managed
was
to
properly
completely
heat treated.
ruin the heat treat, so I think it just crumbles if you try to sharpen it.
Oh,
So
really? Oh, interesting. And then tell me about this piece. This is
yeah, so
another
that
file.
was
This looks definitely like a step up.
yeah, I don't remember which piece that is. as far as the timeline goes.
Uh-huh.
That was one that Gustavo, like, I know he helped the grind.
Okay.
Like, he helped me grind it on his machine. I believe I forged it, and I think he also helped shape the guard.
Okay.
He just and I probably ruined it after he shaped it, but yeah. So I still have that one too. So that's
Yeah.
actually in a drawer. But yeah, it's and don't blame him for a bad grind. I'm just saying that, it was
Oh no.
nothing before that. So,
Sure.
but
It was a
yeah,
blob.
just kind of these rustic things, and these were all uh yeah, pieces that I just started there, and often they were heat treated in a forge. And I mean, I think they were mostly this. I think the transition, yeah, some of these is when it starts to get into American, when I started here, when I moved here.
Okay.
So, but the first few, yeah, right about to there, I think
With
was,
these wrapped handles.
yeah,
That's in the United
those
States
were in
or
the UAE.
okay.
So there was a way to do handles without um
Without drilling.
as much, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I see. So the drilled handles is kind of where you start doing stuff in the US.
yeah, kind of. I did some
Oh,
drilled handles before that, but yeah.
okay.
So um but yeah, I was messing around with different techniques, and it was a lot more like seeing something online and being like, that's cool, I want to try that,
Sure.
you know. So,
I'm
but yeah,
I'm honestly, I'm still really impressed by early grinding from you. And
I
I'm
was better
curious
at
what
grinding then.
you were better at grinding than okay, so what do you think it was? What helped you? I mean, do you think you're just like you're born a natural born grinder or
Not
cuz
at
like
all. I've
you
always thought that I wasn't great at grinding. But no, I say I was better at grinding then because I was grinding a lot more of these little, so
mm,
now if I do a plunge line, I'm far more I'm less confident because I was
oh, okay.
doing plunge lines there. Now I don't do plunge lines very often, so
Sure.
it's just different. There was definitely a time when I was a lot more I was experimenting a lot and doing a lot more. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so just messing around with different stuff.
What do you think are some things that really help you with your blade grinding to early on, like kind of dial it in and get some control? Because I think that's one of the things people really struggle with, and I feel like I naturally, at least with the rest of the blade grinding, was it came pretty naturally to me. But
Mhm.
yeah, plunges were difficult, even though at the same time we didn't really do plunges when I worked for Bob, and I
Yeah.
still basically never do plunge work. What were some things that helped you early on to get better at your grinding work? Because it
Well, I
really
think what
is
I
pretty
said,
impressive.
it was a lot of repetition
Sure,
was a huge part of it cuz like now I don't do things like the small knives obviously go quicker,
sure,
and now I don't do things, so I'm slower getting into the plunges and stuff like that. And I don't think any of these plunges were fantastic or anything, but yeah, it's the repetition. Um like, I didn't think I was very good at grinding back then, so this is
sure.
hard to answer. But
Well, and it looks like you use guidelines too a lot to help with kind of
yes,
the like
I
line
drew where
flow.
I wanted to go, and it's like even today, so many of what you might call a saber grind ended up being full flat grinds because
Sure.
you creep past your line, and then you got to match it up with the other side, and you just keep creeping back, and yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I've
um,
definitely played that game, chasing it back and forth.
so that's always been. But yeah, I think a lot of it is doing it. And
Sure.
at the time, I wasn't super confident, and it's just um I watched other people about, grinding stances, and it's like, and I never really nailed anything down, and I'm not super scientific about how I grind. And now I almost, when possible, I'm using a push stick. I generally set my starting grinds with a rest and a push stick, and then um, when I get to the plunge line, I switch to freehand grinding.
I see.
But I just for ease and repeatability, I often use a what like a file guide type thing to get
Sure.
consistent plunges.
Yeah.
It's just faster. I didn't use a file guide very often in the beginning. I felt like it was something you had to learn, right? It's you gotta learn how to freehand grind, you know. So I used it less back then, and with the doing them quicker, shorter plunge lines more often, it
Sure.
was easier. Also, using thick stock makes for great plunge lines.
Right.
So, like, yeah, getting a
Because you get that plunge line becomes kind of a shoulder that you can kind of walk back.
yeah, and it
Um,
it makes a very defining line if you can do it nice and clean. It makes a
sure.
great looking um, thing. So
Yeah.
you get a lot more definition in your bevels and all that stuff. More
I
dramatic, I guess.
Yeah. I think I might have found the one that you brought to that show and showed
There's a
me.
professional shot of it, like Eric Egley.
Oh, you did? I don't Did you put is that on your
No,
Instagram?
that's before the show. These are kind of my first
Okay, this
chef
isn't it.
knives. No, I think that was already done. There's one that stands out, it's edited and whatnot. Yeah, these are kind of my first forays into the chef knife thing, and
When you make these great EDCs, and I don't know if any of them have the fuller yet. You've done some
no,
fullering, I think.
Fuller's came a bit later
Okay,
after I started with more chef knives, I believe. That was an interesting piece,
this one.
and I'm tempted to figure that's AEBL.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, I threw it in to see if I could get an etch, and it revealed what I believe to be some sort of alloy banding.
Yeah,
So, and I have not repeated that since.
I got you.
So, but it is very interesting.
There's Miss Ada.
So, but
Oh, here we go.
yeah, that
I
might be one of my first fullers. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's not bad. I'll tell you what. And I think what I really like about your fullers is the way that they align is that they work straight to the point of the
Yeah,
blade, which is what I really like about your fullers over other fullers I've seen. Um,
the fuller inspiration always came from Hatcher knives.
Hatcher knives. It sounds terrible to say out loud, but Hatcher was a big deal for a long time. Like
He
big.
was. He was one of the guys that when early on when I started looking more into online, finding knife makers online,
Yeah.
it was, Hatcher was there all the time.
Yeah.
And his stuff was so clean
Very
and
clean.
very proportioned and stuff like that. So
Yeah, really nice machine finishes as well as hand finishes, and his
if you
fullers and yeah,
yeah.
Hatcher knives is really great.
And none of these they were just kind of random,
Yeah,
just trying to find what I would make and trying different things that I liked and stuff like that. And
sure.
I always liked Hatcher knives, Nick Wheeler, fighters, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But even then, it's just they're not practical. I like the little EDCs. I still want to make more of those. I really
Sure.
like one of my small designs,
Yeah.
the smallest ones. But yeah, no, it's when you're starting out, it's all experimentation and
All
trying different things.
experimentation. Do you
So
have or actually so like when did you get into when did culinary knives become a thing for you? Or what made you want to pursue culinary knives? Cuz or do you do a lot of cooking or was your wife wanting a culinary knife?
None
Because
of
I
the
know she's a
above.
very talented cook. What's that?
Yeah, no. I have a video of her. I should post it on Instagram. She grew up with no cutting boards and no space, and she could make a salad on her lap, like over the
Oh
bowl.
wow. Yeah,
She's,
sure.
I've seen her, prep for mashed potatoes or something, and she just, does it with a paring knife in her hand,
Uh-huh.
and she does it so fast, and she does all, she uses a cutting board now from time to time, but she often just skips it and just uses a little knife and does it that way, and I find that quite impressive, actually.
Yeah, like
Um,
the in the air hand cutting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but no, and I don't cook, and I don't like to cook, and
Cooking's
it's
not your thing. That's fair.
no, it's not. And yeah, listen to some of your interviews, and everyone wants to cook, and everyone gets into it because they love cooking,
Not
and
everybody. Not everybody.
not everybody, but no, I think it was a few things. I'd started listening to Knife Talk. You guys all built chef's knives,
Yeah.
and it kind of got me. I made my first. I still have my first chef knife. I made it in Dubai out of a recycled machete.
Oh, okay.
It's basically all scraps. But yeah, it's still in my parents' kitchen, I believe. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, no, I goofed around with them, but um, no, I think I started getting into it. One of the things I always remember was, I think at one point you guys interviewed Nick Anger,
Oh yeah.
and he had just said he had gotten into chef's knives. I don't want to misquote. I believe it was him. It was making something simple the best you can.
Okay.
Because there's, yeah. So and getting beauty out of something basically quite simple,
Yeah.
but yeah, and doing it to the best of your ability, and also just you start making. I don't know. For me, I was making all these knives, and they almost never get used.
Sure.
The full tang hunters and stuff like that. There are people that go out and hunt and use their knives, and
Yeah.
some like, but and then the big fancy stuff that I enjoy the look of them and stuff like that, but they're
Right.
they're just not functional, and they don't get used, and it's the chef's knives came along as like, I want to make stuff that gets used.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. I think that's
Um
cool.
so and has function and is a constant pursuit of just the best it can be, basically.
Yeah, performance.
So
Yeah. I like that because well, while you're not coming to culinary knives from a perspective of being a user of them, I think it's important and valuable that you are coming to them from a perspective of seeing them as a performance tool and figuring out how to optimize it as a performance tool so
yeah.
that it because it is a thing that will get used, and because it's going to get used, you care that it performs well,
Hmm.
and you've been pushing that for a long time. And I found the picture from Eric Egley of the knife that you brought
There
to
we
Blade
go.
Show,
Yeah.
and Blade West in Portland, Oregon. And yeah, like when I saw this, I was like, damn. And at this point, you had been making knives for how long again? Like a year and a half, year,
I don't remember the
2 years?
time exactly, year and maybe. I mean, because I made my first knife in 2015, and then
Sure.
I didn't make another knife for 2 years, and then I made
Right.
a couple, and then I moved here, and yeah. So, but I do remember that was the best I could tell. I didn't number them as I went, but I went back through everything I could find, and that is my 100th knife.
Oh wow.
So
So, but at that point, you probably have maybe a cumulative. If you're doing if somebody was clocking your hours, probably about a year and a half, year to
yeah,
year and a half of work, right?
something like that. Yeah.
I think that's pretty damn impressive.
So
And I think this is like seeing this, I was like, oh wow. That's pretty wild. And I remember the geometry being pretty good on this, and the contours and everything were pretty nice. And I don't remember what feedback I had, if any.
You didn't give feedback, no.
That wasn't very helpful. Sorry.
You were surrounded by people handing you knife after knife, and yeah, and you were just trying to be nice to everyone, and you said nice things, but you said nice things to everyone. So I wasn't like, I was like,
I was
I
handing
don't
out
know, I
head
don't know
pats.
what that means.
Good job.
Yeah, you're very supportive like that. Don looked it over, like he just held it for 5 minutes, looking at it from every single angle,
Sure.
and he was took it over to and showed it to Taro,
Right.
and Taro bought it right there.
Oh, Taro just bought it. Nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, yeah, he bought it the next day, but he said he'd buy it right there. So I don't know if he actually wanted it, but if Don just pushed him into it, or but yeah,
No, Taro was always very interested. So Taro,
yeah,
for anybody listening, is a very talented chef from Eugene, Oregon, who has been a big supporter of American makers, um, trying to help encourage American chef's knife makers to push their geometry. And actually, it was him that pushed me towards the S grind.
mm,
Um, and he also, I think, influenced Ian Rogers, who's Hayburn Knives, um,
yeah,
to
because he lived
also
quite
pursue S
close
grinds. Yeah, and
at the
Ian
time.
Rogers, yeah, was down in Portland, or sorry, down in Vancouver.
Vancouver,
Yeah, he's over in
basically. Yeah,
Oklahoma now these days.
yeah.
Um, and so Taro, I blame Taro for encouraging all these different make. I think one of the first American makers was Marco Sorkin, who was out of
Mm,
off the East Coast, who started doing S grinds. Um, and then I think Robin Dahlman was another one, who's a Swedish knife maker, um, who's doing like a deep hollow. I think he had like a 14 or 16-inch wheel that he was using for his,
yeah.
but he was doing S grinds back in 2000. Oh gosh, I think 13 or 15. I can't remember, but a while back. It was
Do you know
before I
who
started.
originated that grind?
So, oh
Because I
gosh.
don't see it in Japanese knives.
Well, there is a maker in a Japanese maker, and it was his work that Taro showed me. That was kind of the base, and it was just like a 5-minute conversation with the
Yeah,
knife and showing me like using a straight edge, it's basically a business card, to kind of get an idea of like what the hollow looked like and how it transitioned to the convex geometry. And whether or not it's intentional is another question. But
yeah.
a
Some of
lot of
them were
Japanese makers.
forged in. That's right. It was less grinding. I don't know if the one you're talking about was forged in, but I now
Yeah.
that I think about it, I think some of them had more of a forged hollow than anyway.
Yeah, and I don't know how many makers. I'm not really up on the
Yeah.
Japanese maker market and hand making knives and stuff like that. Who's forging them? Who's not? Who's doing a kurochi finish, which is basically what we would call brute to forge, a
Yeah.
forged texture finish. Again, the concept is not necessarily to have a hollow, but to create um, a gap between the blade's engagement with the food
Yeah.
in the food. Yeah, between the blade and the way it engages and interacts with the food, basically to reduce that surface tension that can be created, especially in a flat ground knife.
Yeah.
Um, so um, yeah, so I don't know. It might be Taro, and I wish I could remember Honora. It might be Honora.
Mm.
I remember Taro being like, I should message. I'll message him actually right now, and we'll see if we can get something back from him. Taro, hey bud. uh, while I'm shooting him a quick message, I will ask you a question. About how your blade geometry has continued to evolve, because I think on that knife that I just showed from your Instagram, that was a like kind of a general like convex grind, right? Like
Yeah.
a gentle convex, down to, I don't know if it was a zero edge or before sharpening or what, but how has your edge geometry or blade geometry and compound grinds, how have they evolved, and or how did they start and how did they evolve and to where they are now?
Well, I started. I'm trying to think. I mean, just remember kind of like go as thin as you can, like that kind of advice. It's like chef's knives should be super thin, and that's kind of where I started. And then Dawn put out a pair of videos, I think. Um, One of them was specifically on edge thinning
Sure.
and how he grinds knives. And whenever somebody asks me how do you grind chef's knives, I just point them at that video because it's just like Dawn explains every step of how to get a good geometry on your knives. Now
Sure.
it will require development practice, but the foundation is there. And if you follow that foundation, that's your starting point. You go from there. So and yeah, so that was kind of um how I started. And oh, I don't remember exactly. I know they were thicker than they are now at the edge. That's just been kind of a progression. And I know
Sure.
then, I started messing with um S grinds, and then I didn't have a radius platen, but I got a 16-inch contact wheel, so I started messing with those,
Okay.
with doing hollows with that. And I started with kind of trying to wallow out a larger area.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, it was kind of searching for something to set yourself apart. My knives never attracted new people. They There wasn't much to them. They looked quite simple to people that weren't into knives necessarily. One, they
I
weren't
see.
forged, they weren't Damascus, they weren't, so you wouldn't find somebody who doesn't know much about
Mm,
knives and show them my knives and be like, aren't these great? No, they'd be like, they just look like a knife. It's just
right.
they look like a knife. You can, because and so that was stuff that people would see up close. That it was, I don't know, higher fit and finish, or
Yeah.
better geometry or something like that. And so, but the development, and then I started messing with the B grinds with the fullers. Um, Again, I always have to say, me and Charlie were talking about that
Sure.
together, and I'd even mentioned, I think, to you the kind of the idea of trying to just get a steeper um, entrance into the main hollow,
Right.
a quicker drop off, a ledge,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I started messing with that, and I think I it's really hard to remember. I tested everything. I always test my knives, but it's
Good.
really hard to remember how was that one. I don't get them back very often.
Sure.
So, um,
Just as an example of the beat grind you're talking
yeah,
about. This is
yeah,
the knife
and
we actually used in the calendar.
yeah, no, that was a good one. I think that one went to eating tools.
Yeah. I think I stole this picture off of Eating Tools.
Ah, okay, yeah, but yeah, I think one of my customers over in Seattle ended up getting that one.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So, um, maybe I did a couple with those blue pins, that
Yeah.
same color combination, and descending pins, and I can't remember which one he got. But yeah, I think I don't know my geometry may have gotten much worse when I started messing with the B grinds.
With the B grind. Okay.
Yeah,
Do
because
you
I
think it
think
was? Oh,
I
go
started
ahead.
getting thicker to
Right,
make
because you're worried
space
about.
for everything.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so and I think the first one was probably one of the thinner ones I'd done. The first one I ever tried, because it was the first one and I'd been doing
sure.
my normal geometry. Oh my
This
goodness.
isn't a B grind. This is a S
Oh my
grind. This is
goodness.
one
Yeah.
on a smaller, probably about a 5-inch, like petty or something like that.
Yeah, it's really short. That's why, and that was the 16-inch contact wheel, I think.
Yeah,
And so it was perfectly fine. And even now, I use a 20-inch contact wheel for everything, and I don't
sure.
wallow it out. I do a
Yeah.
deeper hollow than a lot of people. So
Which creates, honestly, it creates a very effective
it does.
cutting
I
knife.
do not know if the actual fuller does much at all. So,
You mean the B portion?
yes.
I feel like they do.
I
I feel like it does.
I think it's interesting because I think these different geometries can be made poorly and well. Like you can do
Right.
them right or you can do them wrong, and you can get better results from one over the other one just in execution, not
Yeah.
necessarily because of the actual grind. So
Right.
um uh generally, now the fuller that I add opens up the
Hmm.
overall hollow. It makes it larger.
Okay.
So you will get a bump in food release by adding the fuller. But if I did, one of the things I want to play with is if I do the hollow down to as low as I would do with the fuller, how will it compare?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense
So
to me.
yeah,
Yeah. Let's see.
but yeah. So that's when I started to see more interest in the work, is when I did that.
Sure.
And I don't, you
Your
know,
exotic grinds
my
started
my
bringing the
gimmicky
boys to the
grind.
yard. Your gimmicky grind. But the thing is, it's not a gimmick. It is effective. I've cut with your knives,
Yeah,
and it does work. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't know about is like they see these compound grinds and they're like, oh, that's BS. Oops, blow it out there. Holy smokes. Um,
that was the second one I did.
does it actually? And I think I actually cut with this one.
You may
I
have.
think you brought it down to the
I
shop.
know I brought it down to you because I also showed that one to Will Stelter, and I hit you on that same trip.
Right.
So I know you saw it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. And I think you actually might have had this whole array of knives. Now that I'm looking at
Some
them
of
again.
them, not all of them, but yeah, at least the top three.
Yeah. But
So
it is very effective. And I think the reason it's effective, which people struggle to understand, is it's reducing the engagement between the blade and the food. And you're
yeah.
effectively shortening. We lost him again. He'll be back. I'm not quite sure. I wonder if so he's using Safari, and I wonder if that's the issue. Um I was just saying, Dan, that I think this potentially is the issue with using Safari versus Chrome, but it's fine.
Oh,
Everything's being recorded on the platform,
okay.
so whether you dip out or I dip out at any point, it still keeps recording here, and so we're good. So
Yeah.
there's
It was
nothing.
less than like 10 seconds. So
Sure. Um, but what I was also saying about the hollow is that it also effectively, because you're reducing the engagement of the food, you're taking that blade from being 2 inches tall, kind of generally speaking, between
yeah.
like the tip and the heel, to like half an inch.
Yeah.
And if you're only cutting with a short knife, a half-inch tall knife, of course, the food's not really going to stick to it, or stick to it far less, because it's very small. Sure, that would be a very short blade.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think I don't know. I don't think it's the end all be all. I think there's room for all grinds,
Oh, yeah.
honestly. Because especially based on the type of work they're doing, I wouldn't for the most part, like for a butcher cleaver or a scimitar or any kind of knife that's doing any kind of meat cutting, The S grind or a compound grind. Your cat's messing with you over there.
My cat's chewing on a cord.
Oh, perfect.
Sorry.
Cats are
She
good
really
for that.
wants to go outside, but she chose to come inside before this started. So
You can go let her out if you need to.
that's fine.
But that kind of grind isn't really necessary versus a knife that is engaging food that will suction against essentially to the surface, which is going to be a lot of more of like cutting apples, cutting root vegetables, cutting tubers, carrots, potatoes, squash, all that kind of stuff. By reducing that surface area that is engaged with the food, actively engaged with the food as you're cutting, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I bring that up is not necessarily from a defensive point, but I do think it is lazy for people to just write off the S grind as a gimmick when, one, they probably haven't actually done it themselves or cut with a knife themselves that has an S grind.
But
And
that's what I was saying, is that
okay.
you can have an S grind that is bad.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's
sure.
like,
Sorry. Yeah, just because a knife
if
has an S
somebody's
grind
used
doesn't.
a bad S grind,
Sure.
a poorly executed S grind, then they could write it off for that reason.
Sure. And I've seen knives that were a zero bevel, like there was a zero edge before sharpening. But if it rises quickly up into thick material, like it's not gonna cut very great,
No.
unfortunately. If it's too aggressive, essentially, of like a convex.
Yeah.
But anyways, we actually do have a question from Jeroen Nippenberg. He says, "Hi Dan, could you talk a bit about what things are important for you in kitchen knife geometry and how you achieve those?" So, what has it been over the years of developing your grind that has most informed you on where to make adjustments and how to make changes to continue to better and develop your grind, your blade geometry?
Yeah, I still follow the basic principles of Don Wynn's videos on how to create geometry. It's gotten thinner to the edge in some circumstances, but yeah, getting the right convex has always been the challenge.
Sure.
It makes like that too steep to the edge. If it's too much to the edge, if it's not convex enough, even on the compound grinds. Like, one of the challenges I have now is making sure that on an asymmetric grind, where
Mm,
it's for a right-handed user, that it doesn't have um, stick on the other side that makes the knife harder to pull out of the food.
sure.
So stuff's dropping off on one side, but if I do the other side too flat,
Right.
you will feel it stick to the food as you pull it out of the food.
Yeah.
Um, so you've still got to have convex on both sides.
Yeah.
And but how I achieve, I do. I mean, the basics is I do full flat grind and I play with. I'm always experimenting with the numbers and how thick I leave the final edge. Whether something becomes more like a laser or more like a workhorse, because
Hmm.
so for a lot of the customers that you encounter and stuff like that, they the balance is very important.
Yeah.
A lot of the Japanese knives that people have grown accustomed to, for as much as people talk about tapers on chef's knives,
Hmm.
a lot of the Japanese knives don't have much taper.
Sure.
They because of the Yuto shape, they're pretty straight backed until they drop to the tip. Um,
Well, and
and
that's
it's
more of a symptom of just being thinner at the edge than at the spine, right? Rather than
Yeah,
them actually tapering.
yeah, no, it's just the yeah. So it drops to the edge, which automatically tapers it as you follow down the bevel,
Yeah.
basically. But that they're thinner. Some of them do, I'm sure. I haven't seen a ton of them, but one of the best ones that I've ever cut with that a customer brought me, it was actually forged It was thinnest in the middle. It was wider at the tip before it dropped down to the edge.
Oh,
Not hugely so, but it had been
sure.
forged basically flat, and that had just it just wasn't super, they hadn't cared too much, and it was one of the best cutters I've compared to.
Oh, interesting.
But it was a quickly forged piece with very well done geometry. Yeah, so people want that slightly forward of the handle balance. At minimum, they want it to be balanced right at the front of the handle,
Sure.
or further out is what most people want. And so that's one of the challenges with the B grind is it reduced so much weight.
Right.
That you have a big thick spine knife and it would be super light.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I started doing asymmetric grinds, to keep more weight in the blade. Because I tend to do, there's different ways you can approach knives, and I feel like what's popular now is the thicker you can start the spine, the more thick you can have the spine at the beginning for a more extreme taper. It's not necessarily the best way to go about it, but it's popular, and it's, I like it. It gives a sense of weight and mass to the blade. But yeah, so I start with the flat grind. Sorry, answering this question.
You're good. You're doing good.
Start with the flat grind, leave it the edge between 20 thousandths and 40 thousandths. So that's where I play with the geometry, and I can come back in testing. I can thin the overall profile, but that's generally where I start working to the edge.
Right.
And I don't know if I can recommend this because I don't know how safe it is, but I tilt my flat platen back to 45 degrees.
Okay.
And I brought this piece. I use it like a stone.
Okay.
And I put this against the thing, and I use stone working techniques with the belt running towards me, and thin that way.
So I do a similar thing. I just do it vertically.
You run it backwards, and then you.
I don't run the belt.
No, you right. Yeah. You do it like this, and then
it's just vertical rather than
and I tried that. I wasn't super comfortable with it, and I found that I liked the. It just worked for me, and I've kept doing it. And
edge down is tricky.
Yeah, it is.
But it will help you achieve a thinner geometry.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things I know that the geometry have definitely improved since the beginning, because I do a lot more edge down stuff now, and my grinding is all over the place. So how I grind, it's start with push stick, then I go to try to start developing my plunge lines, and then I work on the taper. And when I'm working on the taper, I'll grind, like this, and then like this, and then flip it over, and just slowly, so I can watch all the scratch pattern as it develops,
right,
where I'm grinding and stuff like that. And so yeah, I grind kind of just pretty erratically towards the end when I'm getting into shaping the taper. But then I go to the edge thinning, and that's where one of the things that I feel like has improved my geometry is I've stopped trying to convex things.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I've stopped. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not aiming for convex. I'm aiming flat as possible to the edge. But you have two planes. You have, or sometimes three planes. I mean, it depends on how you grind. I know different people do it, but yeah, it's from, say, I mean, this is where you mess with it, but from, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch up the blade, I want it going dead flat to the edge. And so, but then you have a change as you hit the flat of the blade. And so your convex is up here. You're not convexing to the edge. When I found when you try to convex to the edge, you end up rounding the edge a bit too much, and
Sure.
you can. So that's one of the things that I've found was a big area of improvement for me. So when, yeah. So yeah, so that I thin it down to there. If I feel like I need it thinner and I'm not getting enough control on the grinder, I will go to the disc or stones if I feel like it's not. And sometimes if the grind is a little bit wavy from the 2-inch belt, like
Sure.
if I've rocked it a little bit, the stones help me find any low spots in the grind, because that's a very controlled way to find that. So yeah, and that's, then I'll go back and often on the disc I'll just try to work up the grit progression a little bit to try to get, one, check for flatness, and two, reduce sanding time and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't know if that is clear.
I think that helps.
Yeah, and also I'll often do I'll move to a rotary platen, but one with a the steel backer plate behind the rubber belt.
Sure.
And soften that change. So then it will actually become convex, not just two facets.
Right.
And yeah, and generally that's where I start testing. And then I start testing on potatoes mostly, and then take it back to the grinder if it needs it. So
do you do, and is it more about the feel of how it's cutting, or do you have like data points you're collecting? Like I've seen people use a small cutting board on top of a scale and cut using that to get a sense for resistance in the cut.
that is interesting.
So
It's no, seriously, I'm like, now I want to try that. Because data points would be interesting. That's like what are those sharpness testers with the the line, the
with the filament.
string, the filament that you cut. But yeah,
I can't remember what it's called. A BESS? Is that a
BESS tester? Yeah,
yeah,
BESS, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's no, that would be interesting. Yeah, I go for feel. Food release with potatoes. I take it to a carrot to see if it's doing any cracking.
So just to clarify for other people, so what do you mean? So as you're cutting through the carrot, what's happening? What are you experiencing? What's the positive? What's the negative?
And this can actually depend on preference. Some people have zero problems with a knife that cracks, and if the resistance isn't knife that cracks the carrot, often the it's quite hard not to have any kind of cracking, because the carrots are quite hard, and as the blade wedges up, it wants to start to pull apart, and that creates the cracking sound, and the so. But if it's really flying all over the place and splitting and jumping, it's not great. But the quieter you can cut it, it's generally pretty smooth. But then you have to balance
completing the cut without the carrot cracking the rest of the way, because if a geometry is too beefy or whatever, then you can start the cut, but maybe halfway through or somewhere, at some point, the carrot, rather than being cut completely, it cracks and then falls off, rather than it being cut apart.
And
but
even
like
if
you're saying, some people don't care. Some people really do care.
And sometimes if you get the balance right, that's a very efficient way to do it. It can actually make the carrot not stick, because it actually splits away from the blade, and that's all part, you need the blade has to be a wedge in some form, for no sticking.
It can't be a straight razor.
I mean, if you have a piece of paper and it's sharpened, or actually that might work really well. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it is like one of the products I've started doing, and I'm really looking forward to doing them more often. I've working with someone to get drawings made, because I have no computer skills whatsoever.
Okay.
So I've sent some copies of my blade profile, and I want to get a bunch of Magna Cut blades, water jet cut,
Okay.
for the simpler knives that I do, that are belt finished and no tapered tangs. Um, and
So
I
would that be like 1/8 inch thick material then?
Yeah, 1/8 inch or .1, basically
I got you.
.1 of an inch. So I think I'm gonna lean towards more towards the 1/8 inch this time and see how that goes, or I might get them both in two different sizes. But this time
Sure.
the blade will be 230 millimeters long. So it's a little bit longer than I've done in the past with some of the more Western
Oh,
profiled
yeah.
stuff on .1 inch stock, or .11. It's right around. It's just under an eighth.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoy those, and they're really easy. They're not easy. The thinner the stock, the easier it is to make a good, nice cutting blade.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just adding more material to remove when you start with a thinner stock or
Sure.
with a thicker stock.
Right.
So, and it's just creating that taper. So I really enjoy those, and those would the Magna Cut simple blades. Those are the ones that I would want most in my kitchen for the zero maintenance. Like,
Right.
you know, we we've got all carbon. We've got carbon blades in our kitchen now, and we do not take great care of them, and they stand up pretty well. But a Magna Cut blade is never going to stain. It's simple. It's I almost always do except for under a couple requests, I do just a micarta, some form of
Oh, sure.
micarta handle,
Yeah.
and they cut really really well, and they are just simple tools, and they do their job, and they require very little
Right.
until you want to sharpen it. If you don't have diamonds, you're gonna have trouble. So,
What about when you grind it, for the makers out there who are interested in trying to play with Magna Cut?
oh, I'm a giant baby. Like, Magna Cut was the shocker for me when I'd
Okay.
gone from, I think, and it's probably because I work with it the most, I think AEBL is the easiest steel to work with.
Okay.
I
For
and I
monosteel.
don't work with, like, I
Yeah.
rarely work with, I haven't worked with like 1080 or 1084 in a long time.
Sure.
And those were not difficult, but they had the issue of, like, I tape up my blades a lot, um, in the different steps, and I know I can't leave masking tape on a 1080 blade overnight.
Oh, yeah. No.
And it's like, and so
Yeah. It draws
ABL, I don't have
moisture
to
and
worry
things
about
will
any of
start
that stuff.
rusting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't have to worry about keeping it super clean, or leaving it in a good dry spot or anything like that. The ABL is pretty simple in that way, and it's very easy to sand and very easy to grind.
Yeah.
Um, and then A2 is quite a bit more difficult than ABL, both to sand and grind. It's got a larger carbide
Right.
structure in there, where ABL is super super fine. A2 is has it's pretty fine overall, but it has large carbide spread throughout.
Hmm.
Um, and then Magna Cut shocked me. And people work with super steels all the time. I mean, but yeah, Magna
Yeah.
Cut at 64 Rockwell was quite a, I'll go through on a full size blade at least 460 grit belts, and then there's all the other belts that I don't keep track of. So
And so are you're using ceramic belts then?
yeah,
Yeah. You're using like VSMs? I think we've talked
just
about.
pros. Oh, yeah, you're back. So.
Oh.
Yep.
You're using like VSMs?
Yeah, VSM has been my favorite so far. Both a
Sure.
combination of price and function. So
Right.
don't feel too terrible about making them
Burning.
last forever.
Yeah.
So
You don't mind burning through 4 of them
yeah,
for a blade.
yeah, and it's just time.
Yeah.
It's one of the things. As you do more of it, at first it was like, let's see how long this belt can last,
Right.
and then okay,
Cat butt.
yep. But and then yeah, and then you just start. It's just like this will take forever, and it starts to heat up a lot faster, and that kind of thing. So, and I
Sure.
do everything with a misting system,
Okay.
which is definitely not foolproof. You can still burn up your blade, but it's
Right.
helpful. So
So, how does that affect your visibility in grinding? Because I
it's
have a
not
misting
terrible.
system that I haven't really installed yet.
Oh yeah,
Um, and part of me is the concern of all the excess water flying around and rusting everything up.
yeah. I don't know. The rust is just kind of there. Mostly it sticks to the shavings and whatnot and ends up in the buckets. I have to wipe down
Okay.
my work, but I mean the grinder itself is powder coated or aluminum. Mine
Yeah.
is, and then sometimes use some Scotch Brite on my table to just kind of get the surface rust off. But
Sure.
that's not terrible for me. Um, but I use a work rest for most of the wet stuff. Sometimes when I go to refining the taper and stuff like that, I won't use the mister because then I'll be right up on the with my chest right up against the machine, and it really
Oh, okay.
gets you wet quite quickly. Um,
You need a
but
dishwashing
with
apron,
the workbench, you've got a little
raincoat.
bit of with the rest, you've got a little bit of distance from it.
I got you.
I'm
Yeah.
mostly standing off to the side a bit, and that in that sense, the visibility isn't because that's the starter grind. The visibility isn't super necessary. Like you don't need to be really looking down on it. You just
Hmm.
work to a line and then you continuously move it back.
Sure.
Drop the grind lower, closer to the spine. Um, and then I'll run it really slow when I tilt my thing back and use the platen as like a stone
Oh,
per
right. Yeah.
se. I'll run it really slow and use and turn the water down, and the belt will hold more water by itself, and it's
Mm.
running slow enough to not fling it off at me
Oh,
super
okay.
aggressively. So
Yeah.
um yeah. So and then yeah. Um it's I remember when I started out it was an annoyance, but I guess I've gotten used to it as far as your answer to visibility.
Sure.
And it's one of the reasons why a push stick is easier for me now. It's the water's in the way. So
Right.
but
Yeah, I've thought about transit. I mean, like I said, I've had a mister for a while, but I haven't put it together yet because I think I'm just worried about the learning curve. But I think I would probably find a bit more efficiency in not quenching every 3 seconds, essentially,
yeah,
which is my move right now when I'm finished grinding blades. Is I'm quenching like every 3 seconds,
yeah,
and versus just wet grinding and not grinding it all to hell and burning things up, but just not even not having to quench so frequently would make a big difference in my efficiency. And I think I could fix because most of my grinding is done by feel, honestly, anyways.
hmm,
I don't know how much I need to visually see unless I'm doing the hollows. And at that point, when I'm doing my hollow grinding for the S grind, it doesn't, at least for the large portion of the hollow, I hardly ever have to quench it anyways.
I don't use the mister for the hollow.
Yeah.
One, it's on a different machine, the big wheel,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and it's not directly putting heat into the edge. And on the wheel, I don't find the heat buildup to be as fast.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
same with the
I
radius platen.
do quench after every couple passes and whatnot, but um, in that sense, my hand is right on the backside of the blade,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm using a push stick, I can't feel it immediately. And yeah, with that, you got your hand on the blade and you're not working right at the edge.
Yeah.
So, and do majority of it with a fresh 60 grit belt, and that'll doesn't build up that much heat that quickly. So.
Earlier, you were mentioning when we were talking about compound grinds and stuff, you were talking about thick spines, and I don't think you gave a dimension. I was curious, what does that mean to you? Is that like a 1/4 inch? Is that over a quarter? Is that like 4 millimeter?
A quarter. I'd say most of my stuff is 4 millimeters, 0.156.
Okay.
So just not starting with an eighth. One,
Right.
at an eighth, you can taper the tang, which a lot of my customers really do like the taper tang.
Sure.
But at an eighth, it's getting a little.
It's very
Like, what am
slight.
I doing?
Yeah.
There's not much to taper here.
Yeah.
But an eighth is
And it probably also potentially causes you more trouble than benefit.
Yeah, you get more into warped tangs and that kind of thing, because
Right.
I don't miss the tangs. They get quite hot.
Yeah.
But actually, I do sometimes miss the tangs because I've started. I used to use a magnet to
Okay.
taper tangs, and now I super glue a block to the back because the
Okay.
magnet wasn't the full length of the tang necessarily. It was
Yeah.
close, but not quite. And I don't know. It wasn't as wide as the tang anyway. Super gluing a block that kind of covers the whole thing
Sure.
has really helped me control and keep a flatter plane on
Right.
that. So and then if I overheat it, in that case, it will burn the super glue off. And
Yeah, I was gonna say the glue is gonna pop pretty quick.
so yeah, I do use the mister sometimes, but yeah. So yeah, it's not a huge difference from eighth. But I think yeah, 0.16 ish.
Yeah.
When I find the stock and stuff, that's my go-to for most of my knives. And then it's not uncommon to do 0.18, 0.19. Again, doesn't seem like a huge, but that's when it starts feeling like a thick spine.
Yeah.
And then I've done 1/4 inch chef knife.
Oh wow. Sure.
And that thing was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of grinding. So
Yeah.
this is what I mean. Big tapers are for the forging
Right.
crowd. So
Yeah, I just did one that was kind of more inspired by Don Wynn's work,
mm,
geometry wise. Um, I think part of that too was that it was a, a Sanmai style, and I didn't want to grind into through the cladding. So I was trying to keep it a bit beefier, and so I was like, all right, we're gonna do kind of a quote unquote workhorse s grind.
yeah,
And I actually really liked it. Not only I liked the way it felt, like weight wise, but I really enjoyed the way it cut. And so, yeah, I think I'll probably play with doing more of those in the future. Not all the time, but I think
yeah,
it's good to have like what you're doing, a mix of the thin stuff that's simpler and versus thicker geometries that require a lot more grinding.
yeah,
Um, yeah. And something else that you were talking about earlier that I never really thought about um, is you saying that you don't get a lot of new collector or new buyers, or sorry, a lot of your customers aren't new buyers; they're experienced buyers, which it seems interesting I feel like it would be the opposite because the point of entry for you monetarily is pretty reasonable for the quality of work that people are getting. Um, but I never really thought about it from the aesthetic aspect where if
mm,
somebody's like a first time custom knife maker buyer or custom knife buyer, they're looking for something that's flashy. They're looking for something where people who are more experienced are are okay with the subtler, more nuanced qualities and details of the fit and finish and the assembly and all that, and the grind especially. And it definitely makes sense that you were getting people who have kind of gone through that phase of getting the flashy stuff, and now they want like highly refined,
Yeah,
um, nuanced, high performance blades.
I am going to run 3 seconds and get a charging cable.
Okay, he'll
And
be right
maybe
back,
open the
folks,
door for my cat.
and let the cat out. um, it's just something I never thought about because, well, I guess I don't know. I don't know if I have a because, but it's just something I've never really thought about or taken into consideration before as to why certain people are buying certain style knives. And it totally makes sense that somebody who's new to the custom knife game, they would want their first pieces to be kind of flashier because there's somewhat of a social currency to um, you know the Damascus and all the different fittings and the exotic um, materials that handles are being sculpted from and or inlaid with and carved and all that kind of stuff. And I've just never really thought about it that way. And it was interesting for him to bring it up. And then when it comes to thickness, my stuff actually, when it comes to there's Dan's finger.
Wake up.
When it comes to my chef's knives, when I'm finishing them and I'm going through the finish grinding, they usually do end up where your thicker material is at about 0.15, 0.16. But that's just at the integral bolster transition, and then especially early on, they taper down pretty dramatically. I've kind of reduced that taper. There is still a continuous distal taper. It's just not as thin out at the tip. It doesn't get to about a 16th of an inch, which is 0.0625, until it's maybe 2 inches from the tip, or maybe 2.5 inches. Because once you get under that 16th of an inch, it starts to get pretty flexible out there,
Yes.
really fast. And that was something I kept fighting. And for me, it was just like, I just need to stop earlier. I was trying to do too much with coarser grits. I was taking it too far. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I still have to go to 120 or I start at 36. So then I'm like, I still have to go through 60, 120, 220, 400 before I'm done on the machine. And especially at the 120 and 220, you can still remove quite a bit of material
120 really takes it off if you're not
if you're not paying
on thin geometry and stuff like that. So
Brian Hinnenkamp just jumped in here with a question from he's Tortuga Blade Works. He said, "I find it's a progression." Oh, sorry, I'm stumbling over words. I find it's a progression sometimes with a new custom knife buyer, where they start with something simple, and by the end of the development process, they want the craziest knife ever. I've for sure have had that. They're like, "Oh, all I want is like a very basic knife." And then they see something else and they're like, oh, but what if we add this accent, or what if we, which is fine, that's like part of it sometimes. But especially with newer buyers, I can see like they might be one and done for all they know or all we know,
yeah,
versus somebody who is kind of like a real aficionado, I guess, and a collector who really
it's
loves and enjoys using the things. Is a very different game for those people.
yeah, and it's been a really nice progression, and I've always had great customers.
Yeah,
But in the beginning, it was people maybe getting one chef's knife or something when my stuff was more in the 400 $500 range.
yeah,
Um, and it kind of before I was doing compound geometry and stuff like that, and it was more handles and stuff that was drawing
sure,
the visuals and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it just kind of my customer base really started to shift to the kitchen knife forums people and
right,
collectors. And yeah, they're great customers to have.
yeah,
I think Kimon was talking about it. It's really nice to have experienced customers because I don't send out care instructions with my stuff.
sure,
Like I probably should, but at this and I do send a quick email. I'm like, I'm sure you know this. Here's the basics, but it's they do know it. A lot of them sharpen too, and
right.
So it's nice to have those, and especially repeat customers and stuff. I know, and I mentioned this, but the other day, but it's some of those guys are some of the best people to get feedback from.
Right.
Is the people that have a lot to compare it against.
Yep.
So, and so that's been really cool as well to be able to increase. I just mentioned Kimon, and I had a customer um, in Seattle. I think I said that he had that other blue pinned knife.
Yeah.
I think, but it might have been a different one. Either way, he's got a few of my pieces. He got one of my first B grinds, and definitely my first B grind in Magna Cut, and
Yeah.
I think a combination of the fact that it was Magna Cut, my first time grinding Magna Cut, and he had specifically asked for top priority food release.
Okay.
That knife was way too thick.
Oh, okay.
And he actually brought that back. He really liked it, which was wonderful. He made videos and stuff like that, and really talked me up to on the forums and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
he was really wonderful. But yeah, I got it back a year later, and I was like, oh my goodness. And nothing stuck to it the same way nothing sticks to a cleaver. But yeah, but I thinned it out, and I was quite happy with the geometry I was able to get to it, just in thinning the area between the lower fuller and the edge.
Oh, wow.
And he went from hating Magna Cut, not hating Magna Cut. He didn't like Magna Cut. He could never get an edge on it that he liked, and
Okay.
I couldn't either. Not
Okay.
to the same level as AEBL or something like that. To thinking it's just fine and a great steel because it was down to a geometry that was much easier to sharpen.
To maintain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
So
probably just honing the thing
yeah,
makes a big difference when the geometry is a bit thinner. That
yeah, it
finishing
was
step.
really convex, rounded right to the edge. So when you started sharpening it, it'd ride up you'd be thinning it basically.
Right.
So it was really
Rather than
hard to
sharpening.
apex properly. So
Yeah. I got you. Well, and so another thing I wanted to share that you were bringing up was some of your asymmetric grinds, and you sent me this picture of the triple hollow, and I'm curious. I want you to talk about that a little bit, how that developed,
I think
and
it was in pursuit of more weight in the blade,
right,
um, and just messing around.
sure,
So one of the things I actually recommend is I'm going to go off on a tangent here.
go ahead.
As far as the triple fuller, but yeah, I mentioned Kimon. This customer in Seattle was the
Yeah,
first person that brought knives to me of a high, like that I'd ever cut with, that were of a high quality and caliber from makers like Kimon
yeah,
and I think it's Xerxes. Anyway, and that was the big challenge, and that was after my first B grinds and stuff like that. That was like,
okay,
oh, my stuff needs to get better, and it really has since then.
yeah,
I thought I was doing well, but I had nothing to compare it against. So
sure,
having something to compare it against is really important. And now my original triple fuller grind I've
hmm.
kept because it was one of my favorite cutters.
Oh wow, okay,
Not because of food release or anything like that. It is a combination of personal preference. I don't mind a thicker knife out to the tip.
sure,
The rigidity, the weight, it was similar to this blade, as tall heel, lots of both taper and profile, and
yeah,
um, so I'm tall enough that it doesn't matter. A lot of people want to. I had no idea. I didn't think about this until people started. Like, if somebody got a custom, they're like, no, you can't be over 55 millimeters high at the heel. I'm not that
oh,
tall. And it's like that makes total sense. If you're not that tall and you want to be cutting at a certain height, then the heel, if you've got a 60 millimeter tall heel, they're
Yeah.
not going to like the knife.
Yeah.
So
And how tall are you again? You're like 6'4",
I'm
6'3"?
6'3.5", 6'4", something
Okay.
around there.
Yeah.
So
And what's funny for me, I've never had anybody really complain. I have had specific requests when I was doing customs for a specific heel height, but it never, I don't think it was, or at least nobody frame or put it in the framework of it because they were a certain height. It was just, I just assumed it was their general preference. And I usually, when I'm grinding a blade, oh, he dipped out again.
sorry.
Oh, you're back. You're good.
Hello?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Dan, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. I think we lost him for a second. I'm gonna stop the screen sharing and
Oh,
see.
beautiful.
Are you hearing me, Dan? Yep, that's the move. It's always the move. If something happens with the feed, leave and come back. All right, he's back. Oh, now wait. Hold on a second. Now I can't. Okay.
Reconnecting.
There, now we got you.
Okay.
Thanks for everybody hanging in. It's no big deal.
Okay.
Again, like if anything weird happens during the stream, the best move is just to dip out and come back
Yeah,
in.
and that's what I did this time, and I think it was caused because somebody tried to call me. So
Ah, yes.
the
Yeah,
the downside of using your phone for this.
for sure. Crap, I lost track of what I was saying. Brian, are you still in here? What was I talking about? um, oh, the height and in
Yeah.
the relationship to height of the heel in relationship to people's height. I always try to shoot for about 2.25 to 2.125.
Yeah.
And that really is my personal preference because which is 57 millimeters. 2.25 is 57 millimeters.
Yeah, 55, I think, to 57, like an inch and an eighth, or
Yeah,
2 and an eighth is around 54, 55.
yeah, yeah. 54 is 2.125. I see. So
Yeah.
people are saying 55 is ideal at a max.
Somebody said that to me. Like
Yeah,
somebody wanted that, and other people really like, 60 plus. It is personal preference, but one of the reasons for the preference is height. So
yeah. Which is, yeah, and that's basically it. Yeah, that's like 2 3/16.
yeah.
Just short of 2.25, which is good. I like that. And for me though, my approach for that heel height, or my reasoning for that heel height, has been in regard to like the duration, the life of the knife, trying to get as much material on there while it still functions comfortably, generally speaking, so that through sharpening and rethinning and all that throughout the life of the knife, there's just that little extra material which can make a big difference in how long the knife actually lasts. And yeah, but it does. I feel like once you get above 2.25, you're starting to get into kind of awkward height territory, um, especially for a knife that has like a triangular blade shape. Um, it can feel awkward for it to have a really tall heel versus something that's like a more of like a Nikiri or a Chinese vegetable cleaver that are
Yeah.
designed to have higher heel heights. But they're also the relationship of the handle in relationship to the, I guess,
Your
this
handle is
the
more
cutting
parallel to
surface.
the board
Yeah, to the cutting
due to the
surface.
edge profile. Yeah.
Yeah, it changes the way it's held and it feels less awkward.
And that's where that triangular knife is, that with the triple fuller,
Yeah,
is not great. And it works for me,
sure.
but I get why it doesn't work for some.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
I want to go back to that one real quick, just to kind of pull in here. How like what is, or I mean, you obviously don't need to share anything you're not comfortable talking
Oh,
about. Um, but like I'm always impressed with your fullers and how consistent they are and how they match the edge and how clean they are. Like, are you following that with hand sanding sticks or die maker stones to kind of get in there and make sure and get that all cleaned up in there?
Not stones, but I hand sand them. Recently I've started not hand sanding some of them
Okay.
on the B grinds because I think it's kind of a cool look to have that belt finish in there.
Yeah, if you
But
can
it
get it
took
good and consistent, why not?
yeah, but it was hard to get to that point
I
where,
believe it.
especially where it tapers out, to
Yeah.
not scratch, gets errant
Oh,
scratches as you taper out of the fuller at the end of the blade.
towards the end of the
Yeah.
taper.
So that took some practice. It just took, I finally found it. You just do it and then you're like, hey, this one doesn't look too bad. And
Right.
then I'm like, I can just touch it up with the sanding and go back with a cork belt to refinish any errant scratches I get from the sanding.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I've done that on a few of my most recent blades. So
Yeah, I have, I've been curious to try something like that. I've never done it.
hmm
And so I'm also part of me is like, do I have time to experiment in that way? Because I feel like I'm constantly struggling with being behind the 8 ball, but also wanting to experiment at the same time. And, and whether or not it's going to work out is not guaranteed, or whether or not, or maybe it could work out to a certain place, but then whether or not I'm happy about what it looks like is also a very different thing.
yeah, and that the first one was just an absolute. I'm just like, oh, let's give it a try, and it's edged down on the rest with the you know with the contact wheel, and then it was adjusting the rest to get
Sure.
the other two,
Yeah.
and then getting them uneven and trying to figure out how to adjust the rest back to get to
Yeah.
re-get when you've got
Oh my
your
god.
top and your bottom are one size, and then your middle is a little bit not quite right, and going back to it's kind of a pain. I've gotten a little bit better, but I think I've done four of them, and one of
You
them
just
still mine.
you
Like
need a
I
rest
kept it.
that you need a rest that has like either kind of,
Graduations, yeah.
yeah,
like
some like a scale, like angle or like the height for adjust, yeah, all that
what I
stuff.
actually did, because I've got it's I've got one of the Beaumont Metalworks rests, one of the
Okay.
first like super adjustable, all every way adjustable rests anyway, and
Yeah.
it's got a peg under the work rest with a tightening bolt, and so
Sure.
you can raise it just on this peg. So I mean, you loosen it and it just drops down.
Okay.
um Basically, I last time I did it, I used blocks of micarta, quarter-inch blocks of micarta, and I stacked up three, and then I took one out and I dropped it down. And then I took one out and
Mm,
I dropped it down to match to, just in between the arm and the thing. So I knew where to go back to.
right.
And yeah, so that's how I figured that out, at least for now. So
Yeah.
I don't, they're not, that was just a let's try something new type grind.
Sure.
I think it adds food release. Um but on that first one I did, I think the food release was just as good before I added it than after.
Oh, interesting.
So I that one had really, one of the reasons I kept it as well is that it had really good food release without any compound,
Sure.
and that's but yeah, I keep that one in to reference against new knives. I thought that one cuts really well.
Ah, I
And
see.
so if I'm unsure about a knife, I will go back to that one and pull it out and start cutting it with it in comparison.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's, if you find one, and I do like on one of the Magna Cut knives that I start with a thinner stock, I expect it to cut better than that one.
Sure.
But it also, the overall feel of the experience doesn't feel the same. The
Yeah.
knife is lighter and stuff like that. I mean, it makes a big difference in in the weight of the knife, I found, in how it feels while cutting.
Right.
So, so yeah. Anyway, and then I before that one, I had a different one that I kept that was kind of my standard to test against, and one day I'll try to move that one on and get a even better knife, hopefully.
Yeah. And I'm curious, so something I would be concerned about when doing these is how does that affect um, future grinding, thinning, whatever of the blade? Do those hollows go past kind of the cross-sectional center line, or are they staying on one side over the other, or?
That's a good question. I
Yeah.
doubt they go over.
Okay.
That was a one. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not sure what size wheel that was.
Sure.
They might. I would think though that if you're actually thinning these blades, it will just like an S grind, it will just disappear. The fact that if it goes over, I had not thought of that, but it will be a long time before somebody figures that out.
Sure. Well,
So
and because since I'm just like thinking in my head, if it's asymmetric, then that means the left side, you could kind of adjust the thinness really just predominantly from one side. And if it did go over that cross-sectional center line, and
that's true. Yeah.
and if anything, then
And you could
the
make minor
hollows would have to be
adjustments to the
recut.
other side to
Yeah,
keep if you ran into a steering issue or something like that.
sure.
But yeah.
Hmm,
I've
interesting.
yet to find anyone thin one of my knives. It's something that I've thought about recently and been like, people talk about it a lot,
Talk about thinning knives.
thinning knives a lot, and I've never seen anyone. If somebody has, which I don't know, but yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to see it. And I've thinned like that MagnaCut knife,
Right.
but I have zero worries about a MagnaCut knife wearing out, no matter
Right.
what geometry it has. I mean, it is so far beyond like a 1080 as far as wear resistance.
Sure.
Even the amount of steel you take off when you sharpen it and stuff like that. It's just that's the benefit. The downside is price and time,
Yeah.
and for the customer it's price and whether or not it's even worth it.
Yeah.
AEBL lasts a long time too. It's more resistant than 52100, or wear resistant than 52100
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I really like AEBL. I've messed with CPM 154, or Damasteel makes a similar steel, RWL.
L. 34.
Is it 30? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. And I've messed with it, and I've just kind of come to the conclusion that I'd rather just stick with MagnaCut and AEBL. I've been looking for kind of an in-between steel,
Mm-hmm.
and haven't really found it. So it's a great steel. Its properties just, it's not filling a gap, I guess.
I see.
It's got better edge retention than AEBL, and lower toughness than MagnaCut, which has better, yeah, and AEBL. AEBL is super tough.
Wait, what steel is that has that?
What? Sorry. CPM 154 has better wear resistance than, or edge retention than
Mm-hmm.
AEBL, and worse than MagnaCut as far as edge retention goes.
Right, because of the wear resistance of the
Yeah.
MagnaCut. Okay.
But it's less tough than either AEBL or MagnaCut.
Oh, interesting. What about the RWL 34? Or
I
does it
don't know
feel?
if Knife Still Laren Thomas has done tests on them directly. I think he may have, but differences he's found in steels that have the same recipe have been pretty, because they are the same recipe.
Right.
Have been
And the
pretty
match, I guess, for
minimal.
the CPM, yeah, the manufacturer of them is also similar
Yeah, they're using the same
theoretically.
processes, and you
Yeah.
know, if Damasteel may claim a slightly cleaner,
Of
less
course.
impurities,
Sure. Yeah.
but that's kind of hard to find sometimes. Like, you're looking for the impurity in a pretty pure steel, so it's I guess it's been hard to find much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But there was slightly. I don't know. Now I'm talking about stuff I have no idea. I'm like making stuff up. Maybe like I have vague memories of something that I'm like, maybe that's completely false. So
Liar! No, I'm just
yeah,
joking.
but yeah,
Brian's actually got another question here. He says, "Do you go by feel and testing mostly, or do you do measurements? Do you take measurements that you like to target, like thickness behind the edge?"
thickness behind the edge. I like to target under 0.005 or 5 thousandths. I think it is.
So that's behind the primary sharpening bevel.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the top of the primary, you like
Generally,
5.
I've come to the conclusion that my micrometer that I'm using is not maybe as accurate as I thought.
Okay,
It's set a benchmark, a standard,
sure.
but I got some potentially more accurate calipers, and yeah. Anyway, yeah, I've gotten it down to like 0.003 on at times, but I haven't found all that much difference between that and 0.005
Sure.
behind the edge. But that needs to be after you've sharpened,
Yeah,
which should be a pretty minimal bevel. That was the first B grind I ever did.
this one was.
And
Okay.
yeah, and that one went to Gabriel for testing.
Okay.
Gabriel Crocker Cutlery, and that was
Right.
kind of the start. He liked it. He got some attention to it, and the guy who I don't know if I should share a name. I think you guys talk about him sometime. Kyle Heath.
Oh yeah,
He bought it, and he also bought our collaboration.
he did.
Yeah. So no, he's a great guy.
For sure.
He also helped me fix. He works on VFD systems.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he
I didn't
fixed
know that.
my.
I got lots of questions for him.
I blew up 2 VFDs in one
Oh,
day,
geez.
and I was just like, I'm dead. I'm dead in the water.
Yeah. Oh
And
my god.
he was like, send them to me, and he fixed them. One of them's not quite fixed. It's been sitting in a box to be sent back to him, but uh, I don't. That might be my fault again. It's probably my fault again. So
User error.
yeah. But anyway, it's but yeah, no, he was super nice about that, and I've had one packed up for him to send to him, but I also said I'd give him a custom for helping me, and haven't got around to that.
Sure.
So I don't want to send it back to him until I have something to show for what I've
Yeah,
said I'd do for him. So
I gotcha.
I don't have the AEB or the A2 steel I need for his order, and it's been. I like to order steel in as much bulk as I can, so I've been
Well,
holding
I
off.
still have some A2 from you.
Yeah, I don't think it's big enough. He wants a Chinese cleaver.
Oh, that would require a bit of forging.
Or a wide piece of steel.
Or a wide piece of steel.
Oh,
Yeah.
yours. Yeah, if you wanted to put that 3/16 into a
I'm
4-inch
I'm
wide
like,
blade.
I'd probably have to stack it up actually, weld it back together and then for it. But I don't know how well A2 welds up.
Yeah.
But I know it'd be a pain to forge
Oh, absolutely.
for sure. So again, Brian's talking about targets for thickness. So that's the thickness behind your primary cutting bevel,
Yes.
sharpening bevel. But then, so like at the transition to the B grind or even the transition to the S grind, what is your transition, your thickness of your blade look like at those points?
I do not know.
Okay.
I've taken measurements in the past. But I know they're all different. Like I
Yeah.
said, I really mess around with where I start my thinning, whether I
Yeah.
leave the flat grind, if I started at 20 thou or 40 thou. That's kind of where I mess around with that. And so that'll end up with different things. And the thing is, if I start at 40 thou and I don't like it, if it's too heavy of a grind, I can thin it back down from the top, from the
Right.
spine down, and
Yeah.
bring, I don't know, the cheeks of the bevel or whatever. I can thin those down.
Right.
And so it's the question is, I do measure edge thickness, mostly to see if I can go thinner.
Sure.
Like I've got a bench, I don't want it too thick, basically.
Yeah.
And then it's by feel, and I think by feel, because the potatoes different on a different batch of potatoes, a
Yeah.
different batch of carrots. These things do change, so that's where having something to test against is I think important for doing tests like that.
Yeah.
Because if you're not sure if it's the food's fault, then you get the knife that you know better,
Right.
and see how it's handling the same thing. So
I will say on mine, I think the transition at the from the convex to the hollow is usually about 30 to 35 thousandths, which is still kind of thin, actually, now that I think
very
about it,
thin. Yeah.
because a 32nd of an inch is 32.5 or something like that, right? Or 125.
Yeah.
Or sorry, 0.0032125
That's right. Yeah. No,
is
it's
half.
that's very
Yeah.
thin, and I don't think I'm definitely not that thin.
But then
Um,
just because it's thin though, like I've definitely I've done some S grinds and I'm like, this isn't cutting the way I feel like I would like it to. And I think you can push if there's not enough of a kind of a transition area, if it's too flat going into that hollow, great, you have that hollow. But if the transition is just like this slight little bump, it's not really much versus coming in a little, and it doesn't have to be a ton, but a little bit more with your deeper hollow, you get more of a transition there, that peak, that ridge. And I think that really plays a massive role in how well the blade cuts through the food as well as the food release. Um,
yeah.
and that surface tension, like relieving that surface tension. Another issue of the surface tension that I forgot to bring up when we were talking about it earlier with like flat grinds and stuff like that is that not only does it cause the food to stick to it, but that sticking action, that surface tension engagement actually creates what I refer to as cut friction. But it's because that surface is so engaged with the surface of, or the food is so engaged with the surface of the blade that it makes it hard to cut through it. So a
Yeah.
lot of people might be like, well, if I'm going to do an asymmetric, I might as well just do a flat grind on one side because that'll be fast and easy, and then I can do a compound grind on the other side. But the thing is, like you were saying, like it can fall off great on one side, but still, if the flat side is heavily engaged because of all that surface tension, it's going to make it difficult to actually cut through the stuff, whether it's just a potato or an apple or whatever it is. And it's a slight or subtle convex makes such a massive world of difference. And you even brought down a subtle convex that you did at one point, or maybe with some of the other knives that you brought, and I was shocked at how great it cut. It just
Mm,
cut so nicely.
yeah. I
Yeah.
hope I hope they cut better now, but but
I remember
no,
I've
it's
always been happy with the stuff that you bring down,
well, I
usually.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I can't think
I
of a
mean,
time
that's
that I
the
was like,
reason why
this
people don't do
sucks.
full flats, or in the custom, range, people don't do full flat grinds because, it is the thinnest. That is the thinnest you can get, is full flat grind, but um you're gonna have you can have some suction, and it holds
Yeah.
on to everything as you go through. And yeah, no, I've definitely found that if you go too little convex, you have issues. And I was messing around with asymmetric. I used to do just an S grind on both sides and then the fuller on one side.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is basically the same thing as doing the fuller on both sides. Like, it's the weight difference is nothing.
Right.
And I tried using a radius platen
Okay.
on the other side, but I think that was too. The one that I did, I took it almost all the way down to the edge, almost like a single bevel
Okay.
on the other side, and it would wedge in and pull into the hollow
Oh,
because it was
interesting.
so subtle, and it would
Yeah.
just suction on there
Right.
worse than anything, like if it was flat or something like that. And
Sure.
yeah, I think that knife had its place, like for super fine cuts and super in some things, because it had that almost single bevel, like super thinness at the edge.
Yeah.
But for just general prep and stuff like that, I think it had an issue, especially with potatoes and stuff. So
Right.
please do not knock over my phone. I
You're a
opened the door
mischievous
for you,
cat.
cat. You didn't go out.
Sad cat diaries.
Yeah.
Um. So, I want to kind of turn back to your experience working, or I guess kind of the mentorship or friendship that you developed with Gustavo and other makers. I've been fortunate to become friends with you, and um, we've had a lot of great conversations. Who are some other makers that you either draw inspiration from, or that you've become friends with over the years that have helped to influence and inform the way that you make your knives?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think Gustavo, to start with, he really informed quality fit or fit
Mm,
and finish.
sure.
His stuff was very refined, and that kind of gave it was like it has to be like this, or you shouldn't sell it type thing. And it was
Right.
just like, and that was a big, it set a standard for what I thought it should be.
Yeah.
Um, and then he didn't obviously really set any geometry or the very beginning of when you grind a first knife and you leave it at 50 thousandths behind the edge or something like that, you're like, yeah, this is thin. It's that kind of that standard. He's like,
Yeah.
you don't sharpen until you hit half a millimeter or something like that. And
Hmm.
um but which is not chef knife geometry, but it's decent folding knife geometry, or
Sure.
general purpose knife geometry.
Right.
But yeah, I've mentioned Don. He obviously his design sense is phenomenal, and
Absolutely.
his order, how he sets up his order of operations, and really has a refined process, I
Yeah.
guess, of the whole thing.
It's very
um
methodical.
yeah, very methodical, and he puts a lot of information out there that you need a lot of information to make knives to start out with, but at the same time, Don has everything you need to get, like I said, when it comes to people asking me, right, the information is out there, and
Yeah.
I think Don has the best and uh, basics of starting making chef's knives and stuff. And
Sure.
he is known for some thicker spines and stuff like that on some of his stuff, but the way he approaches edge geometry is wonderful. So,
Yeah.
and very informative. And then I've enjoyed conversations with Benjamin Camon,
Hmm.
and love his work. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And his geometry is he was the first one that I tested, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm shooting for. Like, I need to be more like this. And I think since then, I've improved and he's improved. So, we've kind of, um, he's tried different things and I've tried different things, and we both um, changed certain aspects and stuff. And he's playing around with he was playing around with interesting grinds before I did, and he's playing around with different interesting grinds now. And I'd love to try one of those someday. They're really cool. And I might try a J hook for my own
Sure.
purposes, but I doubt I'll get into doing J hooks because they're taken.
There's a lot going on there. Well,
Yeah,
it's
but
just
they're very
tricky.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
they're
very
very cool.
interesting idea. So, and I don't know, Charlie Ellis, the thing he's working on right now. Don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I've been seeing his posts, but for whatever
His
reason, I can't think.
at least in his stories, is super defined S grind. It almost looks milled, but I don't think he milled it.
Oh, I got you.
Basically, an S grind. The hollow is just completely straightened and edged. Like, yeah. Anyway, it's just pretty cool. But very labor intensive.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think.
it's like it has like a very intentional step down.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, super
It's
cool.
very interesting though. So I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
So,
I'd be interested to cut with that knife. I think he's gonna have it at Blade Show, but I don't know if it's gonna be available for cutting stuff, which is completely understandable.
let's get your showpiece and break it in.
Yeah.
That is the
Well,
problem with these shows, is that everyone's got their best piece that, no
yeah.
one's doing any cutting. No one's bringing produce down to the show floor to cut with. So
Well, unless you got like Will Brigham's, I think Will Brigham's gonna let people cut with his knives,
that's
but his stuff's
fantastic.
all stainless,
His
so
stuff's
of
all
course he
stainless.
can.
It still scratches though.
That's true. Could scratch.
You need to cut with peeled potatoes, which
Yeah, dirt can make a difference.
yeah, no, but yeah, that's one. Yeah, another thing, Magna Cut and stuff, and some of these higher wear resistant steels, they don't scratch nearly as easily. You can
Oh, nice.
put them through a lot more,
Sure.
and they'll stay looking better. But yeah, no, Will Brigham makes some really cool stuff, and
Yeah.
although I've never cut with it, it looks like it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and that's the
Who?
thing. I mean, when
Oh,
we
go ahead.
talk
Sorry.
about this edge geometry and the hard break of
Yeah.
the fuller or the hook grind or what Charlie's working on,
Yeah.
I've seen stuff drop food right off of it with a completely convexed into an S grind.
Yeah.
And I think you do that sometimes. Very undefined
Yeah.
S grinds where it just flows
Yeah.
like a hill into a valley. It's just very rounded and stuff like
Right.
that. And
More of
stuff will
like
drop right off of it.
yeah. It's blended rather than a hard ridge.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different variations. It's for something as simple as a chef's knife, it's surprisingly there's a lot going on with geometry and the different ways you can combine it for
Yeah.
cutting things, and so. But no, I mean, it's been interesting because some of your other interviews, a lot of you guys that are big now started in the 2012 and stuff, I think,
Yeah.
range, and now it's blown up. And when I first got started, there were so many other people starting. I was always impressed with the Australian makers for making what I think is nicer stuff than a lot of the starting American makers.
Sure.
I felt like their standards were higher for some reason.
Yeah.
There's Kevin Room Custom Knives, that when I was starting, he was a big inspiration, and we talked geometry and stuff like that. Clean work, and but yeah, there was definitely, and I saw people that were like, I'm a knife maker now, and they're gone now. Like it's like you there's some of those that were lost along the way as far as my
Sure.
my it's not my age generation, but my knife making generation.
Right.
So, but yeah, it really exploded with, I mean, and then kitchen knives exploded. you guys came out with a podcast that was almost exclusively about kitchen knives, and
Yeah.
people realized that, oh, I can sell kitchen knives to people with money and kitchens. People with kitchens sometimes have money.
If somebody has a kitchen, they need a knife from me,
Yeah.
which is
So,
everybody. Well, and
but
I
yeah.
think it goes back to what you're saying about one of the cool things I enjoy about the kitchen knife making is, well, not only my experience in working for a kitchen knife maker and my experience cooking, but they are tools that actually will get used, and there is a level of challenge there to meet that performance quality of the
Yeah.
thing, rather than just making something that's flashy that somebody could use in the kitchen. It might not perform very well, but it looks cool. Where I'm more focused on making a high quality tool than making that tool look really nice.
Yeah. And it doesn't take much to outperform most bulk made,
Yeah.
big brand chef's knives and stuff, and that's a big improvement. And the fact is that thousands of people, or millions, billions of people are getting it done. They're managing to cook with factory made,
Right.
you know, you know.
Yeah.
People aren't starving to death for lack of a knife.
Sure.
Only other reasons, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but it's fun. It's to get into this level of trying to just, at some point we're just, you know, trying to see how little effort it can take to cut something. Is it absolutely necessary? No. But people have to pay to get these pieces and stuff like that. It's,
Sure.
they take time and work and stuff like that to get that level.
Yeah.
And so you get into, one, they do get used by the people who spend the money and stuff like that. And do, they're not your average everyday home cook or something. They've got a collection of fancy knives, but they're still getting used. And yeah, and enjoyed by people and stuff like that. And that's just, it's been interesting to get feedback from different customers and hear different things and hear the differences between different knives and stuff like that. And
Right.
now I've got customers, like, if I want to try something new, I can pick a customer that I think has experience in a certain thing, or and I'm like, hey, can you give me feedback on this or something like that? And that's
Mm.
that's really helpful,
Yeah.
um, and stuff like that. So finding these experienced buyers, and some of them are chefs, some of them are just home cooks and hobbyists and stuff like that I'm
Yeah.
sure make amazing food, and and yeah, it goes back to that experienced customer things. It's really nice to have experienced customers, and,
Yeah.
not first time buyers. And um, I mean, it's great to have first time buyers, but when dealing at a certain type of knife, it's just not, like I said, my stuff does not draw the eye if you are looking at, if you've never bought a chef knife before.
Sure.
So yeah. And I think in my design sense, looking at that one that, like that one that I showed you guys in 2019,
Hmm.
like I look at it now and I'm like, I don't remember how it cuts. I'm sure my stuff cuts a lot better now. Um, but I knew it wasn't bad,
Sure.
and I know the fit and finish was there,
Yeah.
but it's all the design aspects that I've really toned down. I feel like now I've toned down a lot of my stuff into, you know, the super extreme recurved heels. I've toned down all that stuff to just very
Yeah.
mild,
Yeah.
and just um and that one had kind of that one had a Gyuto style, but a very curved edge profile. Like,
Right.
so it's, flattening out edge profiles for when you want that kind of knife, and having a more curved edge profile for people that want more Western styles and stuff. And so it's all just been a slow learning curve, and yeah.
Yeah.
Do you draw knives?
I used to draw knives a lot more.
Okay.
Especially when I was first coming up with my designs. Every once in a while, I have an idea for a handle shape, especially um, that I'll draw out. I have a few different handle styles that I haven't attempted yet that I would like to do, but I just haven't done yet.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, I the thing I draw the most is probably Damascus patterns.
Yeah.
When planning those out, or I start by drawing what I see in my mind's eye as like the finished thing, and then from there I work backwards to then figure out the process, the order of operations to get to that finished activity, I guess. But otherwise, I don't draw knives a whole lot. I'm just going at I make the steel, I forge the blade, and then I just kind of go from there and attach a handle and start kind of sculpting. But it was interesting. Like I used to try to make my stuff as fancy as possible, and it wasn't super. I wasn't even doing super fancy stuff, but even like an integral bolster versus a non-integral, and a hidden tang, and spacer material, and full and like ferrules and stuff like that. And now I feel like I've done a lot of work to simplify it, because I feel like there's an elegance in the simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
and it is actually very challenging to make something complex look simple. And
Yeah.
I'm enjoying, or I have enjoyed in the past too, the challenge of making something look simple when really it's quite complex and challenging to make.
Huh.
I definitely want to get into more. I think I want to start playing with more museum fit ups, but that's going to require kind of like a little extra work on my side, especially when it comes to if I'm going to do like a faceted Western handle. I have to
Yeah.
do the sculpting on a dummy handle before taking the dummy handle off, masking off the bolster, and then going back and sculpting the handle again. It's like essentially a
Yeah.
second time, or at least where those transitions engage with the bolster. And but that's just part of it. And
Yeah. Unless you
part of it is
just
for
did a
my
drop
own.
down to a spacer, but no, I get there's different
Yeah.
ways to do it, but if you're looking for that specific,
Yeah, and that is
s-
definitely another way to actually do it, like you were saying, yeah, drop down to a spacer from that
yeah, that's
bolster.
just for the, yeah, but you're looking for a specific thing where it drops down to the bolster, so
Yeah,
that's different. But yeah, no, I did that on our collaboration because I didn't know. My goodness, I had no idea. Like I had no idea how to do any of that stuff when I started
sure.
that, and I still have the original handle I made for that knife. And I
Oh,
can't
right.
remember the process of operations I went through to get that.
They
I
yeah,
do not know. So,
that's hilarious.
and that's like hidden tangs are still like that for me. They just every time it's a completely new.
It's like
It's
you're
like
starting all
learning it
over again.
again because I never can remember how to order the process.
Right. Yeah,
Because I
no,
generally like to work in some sort of heirloom fit into it.
yeah,
So, but that, and I also try to avoid using guide pins when
sure.
possible. So,
Ye Yeah, guide pins can be a pain in the butt,
yeah.
for sure.
So, but
I got another question for you. I know we're getting
yes.
long in the tooth. Um, we're at 2 hours and 43 minutes at this point.
Oh, wow. No worries.
Um, well, actually, okay, I'll ask my question. Then Mike's got a question actually here.
Okay.
I was just curious. So we talked about early mentors and influences. Are there makers whose work you're seeing that interests you, or I guess I don't know, not necessarily inspires or influences, but just like work you're seeing, and maybe it's not even knife makers, maybe it's other kind of
Hmm.
disciplines, but work you're seeing that um, kind of inspires you, I guess is actually the word I'm looking for, to kind of keep pushing yourself, either in what you're doing already with your compound grinds, or with your handle sculpting, or things you want to do differently moving forward. It could even be somebody's business model. Like, what are things that are exciting you about other people's work right now?
For a while, I definitely dropped off watching for other people's work. I'm far
Sure.
less active on Instagram now. One, Instagram's useless at this point for growth, it seems.
Yes.
But it's and I'm in a very fortunate position there. I think I started my newsletter 6 months before that started to really drop off. Um,
Yeah.
so, and I'm in a fortunate position that, I've got a customer base, at least for now, that I don't have to push too hard on that stuff. But makers who have stood out to me, oh, and inspire me. I need my phone to look it up. I'm spacing on it now. But the other one would be OEL. I can't
Oh yeah.
remember his name.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can't
Um,
either.
his design sense is fantastic. I always really like knives with good design sense. I feel like it's something I don't excel at, like designing interesting stuff. I feel like I mostly go for function, and just clean.
Yeah.
But the people with very interesting designs like Kimon, he's always stood out as just being very interesting.
Sure.
Um, don't remember his full name. Carries. He makes the really corroded looking stuff.
Oh yeah. I just came across that guy.
Yeah, just interesting. Um, and then there's a Brazilian maker, Zim Knives.
Zim Knives.
I see. This is where I'd need to pick up my phone and actually look real quick.
Yeah. Carries is
It's
KARYS.KAROL. Carries Carol.
yeah,
Yeah, I just came across this stuff like on a discovery page and I was like, whoa, those textures are crazy. I actually messaged it to a bunch of
yeah.
people. um and who was Zim Knives?
Uh, yeah. Not, but no,
Kurt Zimmerman?
no.
Ben?
Brazilian maker.
Oh,
And I feel like I'm really screwing it up. I don't know
it's all
what will
right, don't
happen
worry
if I
about
try to get to my phone. Just a super clean stock removal
Okay,
maker in Brazil, which
sure.
probably because what I do, I'm always really drawn to um, other stock removal stuff, like as far as not all of it, but also mono steel stuff.
Sure.
Like I like Damascus, I like Mosaic Damascus. I don't think I'd ever get into that, although I do want to forge,
Sure.
which is like starting a whole new business. So that'll be a slow, equipment collection, shop space, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I have dreams for it, but it's not happening anytime soon. But I am enjoying working with like Martin Huber in the um, steel and knife maker and metallurgist
Okay.
in Germ- it's Germany or Austria. I forget. Kimon's in Austria. But yeah, I've done some Sanmai. He's just sent me some Apex Ultra
Oh
Sanmai
yeah,
that he
sure.
made, and that stuff's been fun to work with. And um, Damascus with you, and some that I got from Salem.
Mike's
Yours
saying
was
he's from
farmy.
Austria.
Hmm.
Mike Porres jumped
Oh,
in and
okay.
he
It
says
is
he's from
Austria.
Austria.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. I know there's a group of guys over there
Yeah.
that are both in Germany and Austria. So
Yeah, and I agree. OEL, Oliver Martins.
Oliver,
He his work is really cool. And then Mike also jumped in. He says Josias
yes,
Zims. Let's see.
yes.
I'm not familiar with that name at all.
No, but yeah, thank you, Mike. He's just super clean, and he looks like he's got his, it's always hard to tell, but he looks like he's got his geometry on point. And
Sure. Yeah, it's always hard to tell without handling things firsthand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like he's doing good work.
So
Cool. Well, do you have any other than it sounds like you're working with this sand mine material now? Do you have any other projects coming down the pipeline you're willing to share that you're excited about?
right now it's just been maintaining, we got the
Sure.
house and I've spent a lot of time
Yeah, you've been busy working on
remodeling
that.
and stuff on the side. So it's trying to
Yeah.
balance getting a little bit more work done on the house and maintaining a bank account balance that's not not too negative. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's, and I
Staying in
right
the
now
black's
I
important.
know what people want, and
Yeah.
so it's a lot of making, just getting bee grinds out to people.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a fun piece.
Yeah. So this is the collab that we did. Yeah. Trying
So
to see if I can zoom it in a little bit so we can get a better look at everything that's going on. But you did a phenomenal job, I would say. You did a bee grind on this piece. Um, the handle's really cool. I have some other pictures of the handle, but the black and blue carbon fiber,
always loved that stuff. I've still got some saving it.
nice. And then you did the pointed bolster at the front.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Yeah. And that was, before I had heard you talk about that, you just go in with the flat platen. And until then, everyone would try to go like everything I'd heard was people going in with the a radius wheel or something like that.
Oh yeah, sure.
And yeah, so it was just like, well, I guess we just do the facets with the flat, and
Right.
whatever we can't do, we whatever looks bad gets hand sanded. So
Fix it in the hand sanding for
yeah,
sure.
hand sanding will fix so many sins.
It can save you. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is good. I'm just
No, and I like that piece.
facets were comfy.
I've definitely shrunk down my handles a lot since, I mean, I don't know a lot, but my handles are smaller than they used to be. When I get some of
Okay.
my older stuff back, I'm like, this is a chunky handle.
Sure.
So,
I feel that way too.
but yeah, and yeah, the facets I've dropped off on um lately, but
Okay.
I might start messing with it. I've just gone for functionality lately as the main purpose,
Yeah.
or the main making point. And honestly, I find the rounded handles, which took tons of inspiration from you,
Hmm.
the round the you at that show you showed me your one of your first
Oh yeah, the ridgeline handle.
production handle,
Yeah.
and I thought it was definitely the most comfortable thing I'd ever. So just that, more form up front. But then since then I've held some of your more rounded Damascus work with the bolsters and all that stuff, and it's always been very comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's pushed a lot of the direction I've gone, and I feel like I'm more at a place where I'm happier with it now. But yeah, I enjoy the facets sometimes, and sometimes they work well. And
Hmm.
I'm quite happy with some of the facets that I've done in the past.
Yeah.
I was like, that is not my work.
No, I was just trying to
No,
show
that's gorgeous.
the ridgeline just to help kind
No, it
of.
wasn't that one. You showed me one of your original
Oh right,
productions.
one of the
That is
production ones.
fantastic. That was an amazing handle. Um, combining facets with comfort. It was amazing. I really
Yeah.
liked that one, and I think I saw that one in person.
Oh this. Oh,
Well,
you did. That's
later
right.
on, but
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
original 2019 show, it was one of your original production. Like you did like a run of 7 of them
Yeah.
uh,
They're down here
that were
somewhere.
full tang.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry,
Um,
I interrupted.
no, that's fine. I don't know what I was saying. I talked too much. So, but
Anyways.
no, you've and I've heard lots of people say, you know, some of the people that own my stuff own some of your stuff, and they really like your handles are top tier.
Oh wow.
So yeah.
There we go. I found it.
But yeah.
Took me a second. Just to
But I
help.
can't remember what we were talking about. I'm really sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, that was a fantastic handle. I thought
Yeah.
that was so comfortable. And you
Yeah.
do, I mean, that's something I haven't figured out, and I'm scared to do, is the complete and utter taper to the blade. There's no transition there.
I mean,
But
that
it
one
was
has.
super comfortable.
Yeah, it's it's like a 16th of an inch.
Yeah.
But it is tight.
Very
I like it.
minimal.
I like it minimal as possible, because if it's too much of a step, it feels disruptive. And
Yeah.
and I do like there being something there. I'm good with up to like an eighth of an inch, but beyond that, it kind of becomes ergonomics are always really important to me, especially in the pinch grip. And
Yeah.
if it's too much of a step in that transition area, then the ergonomics kind of get messed up, and or definitely not to my preference or liking. Um, but I'm trying to think. No, I did that with the handle scales attached to the blade.
I thought you had said that, and to me that's madness.
I think
It's really impressive. Yeah.
well, and that comes from my work when I worked for Bob. You know,
Yeah.
he had his brass bolsters, and you had to sculpt them on the handle, with the handle and everything, and it's attached to the blade at that point. It is like it's riveted in place, but it's like at almost I think it was like a 3/8 of a step. You can't have that at the front of the bolster, so you had to learn how to get it down. And it's just a matter of tracking the belt over, but it's not just tracking over a 16th of an inch, because if you're approaching at an angle, you actually have to push it farther, like sometimes as far as like 5/16 of an inch. You have to track it off the edge, especially if it's in an extreme angle like that. But yeah, that step was probably only about a 16th of an inch, which is pretty
Yeah.
tight. That's
And
kind of
I
pushing it.
just prep that area before I
Sure.
put bolts on the, I put generally a 45, although I've reduced it to like a 30 lately.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I pre-prep and sand and polish that area and then attach them, and then I don't have to worry about getting too close to the blade on the.
Yeah.
But yeah, which I think is what a lot of people do. That's impressive, going right up to the blade. And
yeah, I'm trying to think why I didn't do that before. I think my concern was if it was too thin in the glue up, if I'd done that taper before glue up, that it would cause some potential issue, or it might not just like clamp down properly or whatever.
yeah, I can see
And
that.
so I wanted it nice and thick up there so I could get clamps on. Obviously, not to clamp the life out of it, but to just make sure that things were, firmly engaged with that part of the tang. Because after the sculpting, that potentially becomes an issue, especially if the blade is flexible.
Yeah.
That thin area becomes a potential issue. And so if you don't maintain enough rigidity within that transition from the tang to the blade, that can also become a problem down the road.
Yeah.
But in those pieces, I think they were 3/16 stock. So it was like, or maybe just under 2.2 inches. But tapered the tang, distal taper,
Yeah.
blade. Yeah, that definitely brought it down. And then like the refining and finishing definitely brought it down. But I still think that they were probably at about 100 or 0.17, 0.18.
Yeah.
Probably.
No, those
No,
are pretty
probably
cool
0.17.
knives.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's one of the there's some guys out there, you, Don, and some others that just have design for the facets. And my facets have always been just kind of what I can make work. And so needs more, like, yeah, I've kind of moved away. This one that I've done multiple times, it works and I don't
Yeah.
mind it. It's just yeah. So
Yeah.
but
Right on.
yeah.
Well, I'm excited to You and I have talked about getting together and doing some forging because we're so close, and because you're wanting to get into forging.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up in case
Nobody gets to invite themselves over. It's just a me and Dan party. No, no. I'm excited to see where you go from there, because I think a lot of people want to jump into Damascus like right away.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is like I'm really thankful for my experience doing stock removal and not doing any forging, not doing any Damascus for a really long time before I started doing that work for Bob, as well as for eventually myself. And it's just been, I think it really made a big difference to make sure I had some strong fundamentals around the geometry of the blade, performance of the blade, before even trying to really think too hard about the other aesthetics that come with Damascus patterns and other kind of stuff like that, and doing museum fit ups and all that. It still has, to me, because it is, oh shit, I lost them again one last time just before the end of the episode. For me, it is it's a really important thing for the knives that I'm making to perform as tools before they are pretty things that we use or that we have around. Here he is. He's back. I was just finishing up my statement about
that's fine. Sorry, I'm gonna blame that on you. That was your fault.
That was my fault.
It's probably my internet, but
we're almost done anyhow. Yeah, I was just saying it was important for me that my knives perform at a high level as tools first before anything else.
Yeah.
And that's what was kind of fun about doing that Smith and Bard, that one, like, whatever mini production run, is because it stripped it back down to kind of bare bones blade, just a machine finished blade. It did have an S grind, and then the handle was what we just showed. But it was kind of fun to kind of step back from the flash and glam, I guess. I think my work is most well known for.
Yeah, it was definitely different, but it was very cool. I remember you had drastically tapered liners, if they could even be called liners. They were in between the wood and the...
They're liners.
Steel. Yeah, they're liners, but they were thick and tapered, so they added a lot to...
Yeah.
They weren't just a line of color down the...
Yeah. I'm actually shocked I haven't seen... Maybe I was just too into it myself, but I was like, oh man, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna start posting pictures and people are gonna start copying it all over the place. I never saw it coming. It was like, maybe it wasn't actually that cool.
I tapered liners once, I think, and it sucked.
Yeah, it's not fun.
So it was a lot.
Yeah,
I think Charlie does a lot for his handles, and I look at some of what Charlie does, and I'm like, no, that's not worth it.
I'm good. His work is
trying to reduce my complexity, not increase.
Yeah, he's working on a different level where it's more like it's sculpture almost.
Yeah, he's trying to increase how many parts and how many different shapes and stuff he can get into a handle, and it's impressive.
Yeah.
But it is not the kind of work I like to do.
For sure.
So,
all right. Well, with that, I want to say thank you to you for joining me for the podcast today and all the insight that you offered the community here in the Patreon, as well as everybody out in the world who's listening to this. One last time, I want to give props to our super sponsors over in the Patreon. We have Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Forge and Anchorage Brewing. We have Eric Kidwell at District 202 LLC, Josh Weston at Josh A. Weston, as well as at Dragon Forge EXP. We have Russell Tinsley at Can't Make Knives, at Ouzel Finch Beers, at Nost Brewing Project. That's N-O-S-T, Nost Brewing Project. Dan Hubbs at 66 Mountain Knives. Those are the numbers, not the letters. The numbers, 66 Mountain Knives. And finally, but certainly not least, we have Lawrence Lake, Maritime Knife Supply on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Maritime Knife Supply, as well as online, MaritimeKnifeSupply.com. Dan, It's always good to chat with you. I love that we get to share that a little bit. Like, this is the conversation we normally have. It's just like now we're doing it kind of more in a public forum. But it was cool to get a little bit more of your background and history, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And again, all the insight that you offer through, your approach to making.
Well,
I think it gives
thank you.
people a lot
And
to think about.
it's been wonderful to have. I mean, what a time to make knives.
Yeah,
To come in and have so many people be helpful and sharing, and it's just I got to step up on a massive base of information that was already there
yeah.
to take advantage of. And
That's a very valid point, because I don't think there's any other time in history where people are more free with their knowledge. And I think that's a reflection of the size of the market that we're trying to sell
yeah,
to. When, you're one smith or maker in a village of 200 people, and the next village is 10 miles down or 20 miles down the road, you have a very limited number of people, so you're trying to keep it all to yourself.
yeah.
Um,
And Knife Steel Nerds isn't there to teach you how to do heat treating.
exactly.
But yeah,
I know.
that's the one resource that came out that I'm like, holy crap. There was nothing, like, it was a lot of work to actually figure out heat treating before Laren Thomas came and explained it so well for knife makers.
Yeah,
So, but anyway,
yeah,
yeah. Well, thank you very much for
absolutely.
having me, and yeah, just helping me over the years get
It's
to
been my
where I'm
pleasure.
at now. So,
Yeah, and I also want to thank Michael Poor, Red Dragon Forge, for jumping in, and Brian Hinnenkamp at Tortuga Blade Works. Appreciate you guys being here and being part of the conversation. Really helps to round everything out, and I appreciate you guys. And with that said, that's it for now. We'll see you guys next month when we're back at it again with another Artisan of Steel. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.